Chapter 201. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. The novel will be updated even faster. Millions of novels will be read for free. All the novels that can't be found online are available here. This was tantamount to admitting it. Everyone looked at her with even more admiration. Gu Jinyu walked into the girls' school, surrounded by everyone. Before entering, she glanced at the clinic, trying to find Gu Jiao. Gu Jiao didn't come to the clinic today. She went to the courier station to send a letter to Xuanningsiang. There was a letter from her, a letter from Zhou Erzwang, who Gu Chongqing brought over from a military camp. There were also some trinkets from the capital for Guohua. Guohua was 2 years old now. She could walk, run, and jump. She was especially good at calling people, especially her father. Gu Jiao asked Xuanningsiang if she had any plans to find a father for Guohua in the letter. Gu Jiao didn't have those rigid thoughts. In Gu Jiao's opinion, Xuanningsiang was still young. She was only 2 years older than her, 17 this year. Gu Jiao didn't think that a woman had to find a man to be complete, but she didn't have to be a widow for the sake of reputation. She had the right to pursue her own happiness. From her good handwriting, it could be seen that Xuanningsiang wasn't a widow who was numb to life and resigned to her fate. She had been by the old madam's side for so long. The old madam didn't like her for nothing. She had her own pursuits. However, she was afraid. She was afraid that this kind of pursuit would be rebellious. She was afraid that it would lead to everyone's disdain and ridicule. When Gu Jiao came out of the courier station, she bumped into someone. They weren't close, but they had seen each other before. The other party was dressed in a maroon brocade robe. He was unrestrained and flamboyant. His features were handsome, and his eyes were devilish. However, Gu Jiao didn't like his devilish charm. Gu Jiao pretended not to see him and walked forward expressionlessly. The moment they brushed past each other, the man suddenly stretched out his arm and blocked Gu Jiao's path. "Miss, long time no see." The fourth prince smiled. "What a coincidence. Are you here to send a letter too?" Gu Jiao looked at the arm in front of her and felt a little annoyed. In all fairness, the fourth prince was not bad looking. If she had not seen that beautiful monk, perhaps he could be considered to be in Gu Jiao's sense of beauty. But if there was a comparison, there would be harm, right? They were both devilishly charming little beauties, but the beautiful monk had thrown him a dozen streets away. Gu Jiao was annoyed. The fourth prince's gaze was unmistakable. Oh, the little lady's temper is quite fierce. But it doesn't matter. His Highness disdains taming a weak horse. The weather is dry. Do you have time for a cup of tea? Gu Jiao glanced at him indifferently. Not thirsty. The fourth prince persevered. The desserts in the Jade House are not bad. "Miss, do you want to try them?" Gu Jiao said, "Not hungry." The fourth prince said, "Then let's go watch a play." Gu Jiao was annoyed to a certain extent, but she suddenly calmed down. She looked at him from head to toe. "Do you have a lot of money on you?" The fourth prince was startled. What kind of words was this? He was a dignified prince. Did he need to give money to watch a play? But he also brought money. He smiled and said, "I brought a lot." "What is Miss like? This prince will buy for Mississippi." Gu Jiao seriously thought about it. "Then let's go to a place where there is no one. Do it cleanly. Don't let her husband find out." The fourth prince did not expect the little girl to be so tactful. He was stunned for a moment, but then he thought it was normal. He was a prince. Who would have the courage to go against him? "I know a place where there will be no outsiders." The fourth prince smiled proudly and turned around to open the curtain of the carriage. "Are you sure?" Gu Jiao asked. Her husband was a scholar and might become an official in the future. Openly robbing someone was not suitable for a future tribute soldier wife. So Gu Jiao decided to give him one last chance. If he really wanted to court death, then she could only help him. The fourth prince was a bit puzzled. Wasn't she asking the wrong question? He should be the one asking her, right? "I'm sure, Mississippi. Please," he gestured. Just as Gu Jiao was about to get on the carriage, another carriage came. The carriage stopped next to the two people. The curtain was opened and a handsome figure walked down. "Your Highness, long time no see." It was the exact same opening, but it was said carelessly. When he heard it, he felt that there was an ulterior motive. The fourth prince narrowed his eyes and looked at the youth in front of him. He said, "Royal Princeton?" Royal Princeton smiled warmly, and his eyes fell on Gu Jiao. He said, "Isn't this Miss Gu? Miss Gu doesn't need to go to the clinic today." "You know each other?" the fourth prince asked suspiciously. Royal Princeton smiled slightly. "When my younger sister and I were traveling, we stayed at the Marquis Ding and Manor for a few days. This is the eldest young miss of the Marquis Ding and Manor." The fourth prince did not know much about the Marquis Ding and Manor. He had only seen Gu Jinyu. Royal Prince and continued, "I just came out of the palace. I heard that the emperor was looking for your highnesses. I don't know if something happened." Since he said this, how could the fourth prince still be in the mood to flirt with a beauty? The fourth prince looked deeply at Royal Prince and in Gu Jiao before sitting in a carriage and leaving. Royal Prince turned to look at Gu Jiao. His temperament was warm and his voice was low. That is the current fourth prince. Gu Jiao knew. Royal Prince and saw that she was not surprised and paused. He smiled to himself. That's true. She was not a flower that grew up in a greenhouse. How could she be so easily tricked into a carriage by a man? "Are you going back to the clinic?" he asked. Gu Jiao nodded. Royal Prince was about to say that he would send her off when there was a sound above his head. It was a tile that had fallen from the roof. Gu Jiao was on his side, opposite was the carriage, and to the side was the corner. It could be said that there was no way to avoid it. Royal Prince stepped forward and used his tall body to protect her, blocking the tile for her. However, the pain he imagined did not come. He blinked and raised his head to look. The tile had already been nailed to the roof of the carriage by Gu Jiao's needle. Royal Prince took a step back and helplessly smiled. "Miss Gu, have you always been this powerful? You make it so that I can't even save the beauty." Directorate. Xiao Lulang was released from school. When he went out, he saw Gu Jiao carrying a small basket and waiting for him under a large tree. She also carried 2 small bags of medicine in her hands, one on each side. Although the weather had cleared up, it was still not warm. Especially after the sun set, the wind on the streets became even colder. Xiao Lulang leaned on his walking stick and hurriedly walked over. "Why didn't you wear more clothes?" "It wasn't cold when I went out," she said. That meant that it was cold now. Xiao Lulang keenly caught the message in her words. He took off his cloak and was about to hand it to Gu Jiao. However, Gu Jiao looked at the medicine bags in her hands. The meaning behind her words was obvious. Both of her hands were full. People around them looked at them. The light in Xiao Liulang's eyes flickered slightly, but he still draped the cloak over her body. His jade-like slender fingers gently tied the ribbon. "Lulang, your wife came to pick you up again?" A supervisor who was on good terms with Feng Lin and thus knew Xiao Lulang joked as he passed by. Xiao Lulang vaguely replied. Gu Jiao looked at him with bright eyes. Written all over her face was, "I'm your wife? Is that so? Is that so? Is that so?" Xiao Lulang coughed softly and looked away. "Let's go home." Gu Jiao followed behind him and slowly walked out. Suddenly, a pile of snow fell from a big tree. Xiao Lulang pulled her over with one hand and raised his other arm above her head. The snow fell down and drenched his sleeve. She didn't move in his arms and looked at him with wide eyes. She was so obedient. This appearance was too deceptive. Even Xiao Lulang, who was with her all the time, couldn't resist. His chest was suddenly filled with blood. Too obedient. He couldn't stand it. Xiao Liulang's breathing became irregular, and he quickly turned his face away. Gu Jiao pressed her little head against his chest and said, "Your heart is beating so fast." Xiao Lulang suddenly took a step back. "No." Gu Jiao looked at his red little ears. "You clearly have." Xiao Lulang said seriously, "If I say no, then no." After saying that, he ran away, but he was too nervous and took the wrong path. With a bang, he hit a tree. Gu jiao, ha ha ha. After the spring exams, the atmosphere in the house was much more relaxed. The old madam went out to play cards and didn't forget to bring her husband along. If she lost, it would be her husband's. If she won, it would be hers. Gu Yan and Gu Shaoshan went to the Lu family's house every day after school to learn. They also ate dinner there. To be honest, the master's wife's cooking wasn't very good. She was comparable to Xiao Lulang, but the master said it was delicious, so they could only bite the bullet and eat. Ever since little Jing Kong made his first good friend in the Imperial College, he would play with his good friend every day after school. Today was no exception. Compared to studying, Gu Jiao thought that little Jing Kong lacked communication with his peers. Therefore, she supported his after-school activities. But today, there was one more person in their small group, Qin Chu. Little Jing Kong was confused. Why is he here? Su Tang whispered. Sigh, my father must have asked me to take him with me. I'm also worried. Su Tang and Qin Chu didn't know each other. Qin Chu and little Jing Kong were in the same class. He was in the ordinary class. His father introduced him, so he had to listen. Little Jing Kong didn't like Qin Chu. First of all, Qin Chu was spoiled and unreasonable. Second of all, as long as he was with Qin Chu, those people wouldn't listen to him. Little Jing Kong didn't understand what kind of emotion this was, so he instinctively wasn't used to it. Su Tang didn't like Qin Chu, but he could sense that his friend didn't like Qin Chu. He felt that he had done something wrong, so he whispered, I'm sorry, I won't take him with me next time. It's okay, for your sake, I can play with him. Little Jing Kong was a generous child. As long as he didn't steal his jiao, everything else was negotiable. What are you playing? Qin Chu asked. Su Tang said, we're building a house. Qin Chu said arrogantly, what's so good about building such a small house? If you want to build a house, build a palace. What's a palace? Little Jing Kong was a good kid who asked questions whenever he didn't know anything. The palace is where my father the emperor lives. Qin Chu almost spilled the beans. He was so guilty that he broke out in a sweat. Fortunately, the two kids didn't realize it. Little Jing Kong asked again, what's an emperor? He grew up in a temple and didn't know about this kind of information. Now that he was at home, his family never mentioned anything about an emperor. Su Tang was born in an official's family, so he knew about this. He explained to his friend, it's the master of the Zhao state, the most powerful person in the world. Oh. Little Jing Kong didn't really understand and didn't really want to understand. He was only interested in their small house. I've never seen a palace, so I don't know how to build one. Su Tang shrugged. I've never seen one either. They hadn't even seen a palace before. What a bunch of country bumpkins. Qin Chu remembered his father's teachings. He couldn't expose his identity as a prince. However, he secretly made a mental note to ask the crown prince consort's sister-in-law during the next holiday, so that he could bring his two little friends into the imperial palace to play. The next day, His Majesty personally summoned Marquis Gu to verify the bellows. Concubine Shu was also present. The smile on Concubine Shu's face never disappeared. His Majesty was still quite cautious. He asked, I heard that Assistant Minister Gu has a daughter. Concubine Shu had mentioned Gu Jinyu's background to His Majesty. Before that, His Majesty had already promised Concubine Shu to bestow her the title of County Princess. He didn't go back on his word just because she wasn't born in the Marquis' family. It didn't matter if she was just a county princess without a fief or a manor. However, the bellows matter was very important. Marquis Gu cupped his hands and said, Your Majesty, my eldest daughter grew up in the countryside and didn't study much. The meaning of his words was obvious. How could an illiterate person come up with such an amazing invention? Marquis Gu didn't look like he was lying. Moreover, His Majesty didn't think he had to lie. Who would give the credit of their biological daughter to their adopted daughter? His Majesty drafted an imperial edict to bestow Gu Jinyu the title of secondary second rank Infanta Hui. She was the first Infanta who wasn't born in the imperial family. Generally speaking, only the legitimate daughter of a prince had the right to be bestowed the title of infanta. The daughter of the prince's family was a second-rank infanta. The daughter of the crown prince's family was a first-rank infanta. Gu Jinyu was the first infanta who wasn't born in the imperial family. Her rank was slightly lower than that of the imperial family's infanta, but it was only half a rank lower. She also had a fief of 500 households. Although this fief didn't cost much silver, its significance was too great. From today onwards, she was truly recognized by the imperial family. With her status, it couldn't be said that she wasn't good enough for a prince. Of course, His Majesty didn't forget the carpenter who made the bellows and the old blacksmith who was the first to promote the use of the bellows. He decided to call the two of them to the capital to bestow rewards. The latest chapter of this book isn't finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_8964286/113764244. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikuga mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 202. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that cannot be found online are all available here. The imperial edict had been issued half a month ago. The old blacksmith and the carpenter were already on their way. They should reach the capital in a few days. Gu Jinyu did not know that the old blacksmith and the carpenter were coming to the capital. After she was conferred the title of princess, she first went to Cunning Palace to visit Empress Xiao and received the gold seal and treasured book. Then, she went to Consort Shu's Changchun Palace to sit for a while. All the concubines sent congratulatory gifts. Even noble consort Zhuang and the crowned princess sent gifts. These two were the most powerful women in the harem other than Empress Dowager Zhuang and the Empress. Their attitudes largely represented the direction of the harem. It was rare that the winds were in the same direction. And did not misjudge you. Consort Shu held Gu Jinyu's hand proudly, her eyes full of praise. The emperor was not the only one who could hold his head high. Gu Jinyu was also proud. Whether it was Yao Shi's favoritism towards Gu Jiao or the cold treatment Gu Jinyu received at the girls' school, at this moment, all the haze seemed to have been swept away. Gu Jinyu returned to the Marquis's residence proudly. She could not avoid being praised by Marquis Gu and old Madame Gu again. Ever since concubine Ling's incident, old Madame Gu had been on the verge of depression. Hearing that Gu Jinyu was so promising and had made the Marquis's residence proud, her face glowed again. She held Gu Jinyu's hand affectionately. Your grandfather is not in the residence. If he was, he would definitely praise you. Grandfather. That was an extremely lofty word in Gu Jinyu's heart. She did not even dare to say it. Would grandfather really be proud of her? In her impression, grandfather was an unreachable existence. Everyone in the family was very afraid of him. He never seemed to be satisfied with any child. Even though eldest brother worked so hard, grandfather still looked at him with a picky gaze. If grandfather really praised her, Gu Jinyu felt that she could brag about it for the rest of her life. Gu Jinyu left old Madame Gu's courtyard and planned to go to Yao Shi's courtyard. She wanted to tell Yao Shi that she had made a great contribution and had been conferred the title of princess. She wanted her mother to know that she was the smartest daughter in the family and was most worthy of Yao Shi's attention and love. On the way, she unexpectedly bumped into Gu Changqing. Her eyebrows curved as she walked up to Gu Changqing and bowed. Big brother. Gu Changqing nodded slightly. Gu Jinyu looked at the bundle in his hand and asked with a smile, Eldest brother, did you come back from outside? What did you take? A little prey, Gu Chongqing said. Today, he hunted 2 birds in the military camp. He planned to send them to Bai Shui Alley for Gu Yan and little Jing Kong to play with. Gu Jinyu could hear his indifference. In the past, she would have left tactfully, but today she was exceptionally confident. She smiled and said, I've never hunted in my life. Big brother, is it convenient for you to bring me along next time? Women can't enter the military as they please. Gu Chongqing tactfully declined. Gu Jinyu was slightly disappointed, but not too disappointed. She took out a jade pendant from her pouch and raised her small face with a gentle smile. For big brother. What is this? Gu Chongqing asked. Gu Jinyu smiled wholeheartedly and said, It's a warm jade from His Majesty. Giving the jade pendant was secondary. It was more important to remind big brother that she had become an imperial daughter. When Gu Chongqing saw the jade pendant, he finally remembered the news he had heard in the military camp. Gu Jinyu had made great contributions and had been conferred the title of secondary second-rank imperial daughter Hui. Congratulations, Gu Chongqing said calmly. He did not take the jade pendant. Since it's a gift from His Majesty, then keep it well. Don't lose it. All right. Gu Jinyu sincerely hoped that Gu Chongqing would accept this jade pendant. Gu Chongqing returned to the courtyard. There were not many ripples in Gu Chongqing's heart. He had not counted on relying on Gu Jinyu to bring the Marquis Fu to greater heights. Thus, whether Gu Jinyu became an imperial daughter or not had little to do with him. After Gu Jinyu had finished showing off in front of Big Brother, she was impatient to let others know. Unfortunately, Yao Shi was not in the Fu. Yao Shi had gone to Jade Water Alley. She had finished making the clothes for Gu Jiao and brought them for Gu Jiao to try on. The result was great. The sleeves and trousers were shorter again. Had this child only just begun to grow? Yao Shi did not know whether to laugh or cry. She pulled down the sleeves and trousers that had been gathered. After changing the clothes, she took out the family's clothes to see if there was anything that needed mending. She had hired an embroiderer to make the clothes for the rest of the family. Every month, there would be new clothes. The matriarch and Xiao Liulong's clothes were durable. Mainly, these 2 were not easy to move. The others' clothes were a bit too horrible to look at. In the past, it was Gu Jiao who mended them. Today, when Yao Shi saw it, she nearly choked from laughing. She had thought that her daughter was omnipotent, but it turned out that she was also a simpleton. Gu Jiao had just finished watering the vegetable garden. When she came to the inner courtyard, she saw Yao Shi holding a pair of clothes and trembling with laughter. What's wrong? She asked in confusion. Yao Shi's tears came out of her eyes from laughing. After a long time, she stopped laughing and asked Gu Jiao, Jiao, who did you learn your needlework from? Gu Jiao thought for a moment, self-taught. Yao Shi knew. Otherwise, who would know how to sew? Yao Shi was about to die from her daughter's teasing. She patted the stool to the side and indicated for Gu Jiao to sit. Then, she held the place that Gu Jiao had mended and said, You don't need to tie a knot with each stitch, and you don't need to leave the thread outside. Like this. Yao Shi took it apart and sewed it again for Gu Jiao to see. Oh. Gu Jiao thought seriously. I thought that I was very good at sewing. After all, sewing clothes had improved her surgical skills. She could sew faster than before. As the mother and daughter chatted, Gu Yan and Gu Shaoshan returned from the academy. Today, they did not need to go to Master Lu's place to learn. The 2 did not know that Gu Jiao and Yao Shi were both at home, so they bickered and each entered the courtyard with a chicken feather on their head. Gu Shaoshan had a small gang in the countryside. At that time, he was the #1 bully in the surrounding villages. The chicken feather on his head was the symbol of his chicken feather gang. After that, he was sent to Qianxiang Academy by Gu Jiao. On the surface, he seemed to have changed, but in reality, he was still a gang of celestial monkeys. Today, he was finally caught red-handed by Gu Jiao. Older sister. Gu Shaoshan plucked the chicken feather on her head. Her eyes moved, and she also plucked the chicken feather on Gu Yan's head. The 2 stood there motionlessly, waiting for Gu Jiao's decision. Jiao Jiao. Auntie Zhang, who was in the alley, came to the door. The wall behind my kitchen is about to collapse. I'll go take a look for you. Gu Jiao looked at the two celestial monkeys in the house, put down the water bucket used to water the flowers, and went to her house with Auntie Zhang. The first time the neighbors found out that Gu Jiao was capable was when the roof of the old chancellor next door leaked. Gu Jiao climbed up and directly renovated the roof. After that, the neighbors all knew that Grandmother Zhuang's grandniece-in-law was capable. Auntie Zhang's courtyard wall cracked and needed to be repaired with mud. In ancient times, there was no cement. It was all lime mortar and rammed earth. Lime mortar was not stable enough, and it was easy to get damp in rainy days. Rammed earth was a better choice. The raw materials of rammed earth were red mud, coarse sand, and lime blocks. There were still lime blocks and coarse sand in Auntie Zhang's house. Little Jing Kong used up the red mud. Recently, he was obsessed with building houses with his friends, so he really didn't know where to get more. Auntie Zhang was very anxious. Can't it be repaired today? I don't think it'll last until tomorrow. The courtyard wall was connected to the kitchen. Once it collapsed, the people who were cooking in the kitchen would be in danger. Gu Jiao thought for a while and said to her, "Wait a minute." Gu Jiao went back to her house and went to the kitchen to find glutinous rice. She cooked a pot of glutinous rice soup and then poured the thick glutinous rice into the evenly mixed lime mortar. "Older sister, what are you doing?" Gu Xiaoshan asked curiously. Gu Yan also squatted down and looked at her eagerly. "Why did you pour the rice soup into it?" Gu Jiao gave each of them a stick and gestured for them to keep stirring. "This is glutinous rice mortar. It's better than rammed earth. It's more suitable for pasting walls." The process of ramming earth was actually very difficult. It needed to mix the three raw materials together and then use a tool to pound it over and over again. The more times it was hammered, the stronger the rammed earth would be. Glutinous rice mortar was not so complicated, but its firmness was much higher. This was because the cooked glutinous rice soup contained amylopectin, which was the perfect natural adhesive. It was an exaggeration to say that the strength of the lime paste adhered by it was almost comparable to the concrete in his previous life. "Be careful, don't get it on your bodies," Gu Jiao said. "Okay." The two of them nodded. When Gu Jinyu arrived at Jade Water Alley, she saw the three siblings mixing the mortar together. Gu Jinyu's brows furrowed. In her impression, Gu Yan had always been a sickly person who would pant when walking. She did not expect him to know how to work, much less do this kind of rough work. Yao Shi sat to the side, leisurely mending clothes. She did not feel that there was anything wrong with Gu Yan's work. Gu Jinyu composed herself and walked into the courtyard. "Mother, older sister, younger brother, what are you doing?" Gu Yan glanced at her and ignored her. Gu Yan hated her. He hated her when he did not know her background, and hated her even more now that he knew. Gu Jiao also ignored her and continued to make her glutinous rice mortar. She did not speak to Gu Xiaoshan, so Gu Xiaoshan naturally would not ignore her. Yao Shi turned to look at her. "Oh, it's Jinyu. Why are you here?" Gu Jinyu gently said, "I did not see Mother in the manor, so I guess that Mother must have come here. I brought some things for older sister and younger brother." Gu Yan rolled his eyes. Who cares? The mortar was quickly finished. Gu Jiao found a bucket and filled it with a large bucket. "I'll do it." Gu Xiaoshan carried the bucket to Aunt Zhang's house. Gu Yan also wanted to carry it, but he could not lift it. Thus, he carried a small shovel. The three siblings went to mend the walls of Aunt Zhang's house. Yao Shi sighed. Gu Jinyu looked at the dirty mortar on the floor and the unfinished glutinous rice soup. She frowned in disdain and turned to look at Yao Shi. "Mother, how can older sister let younger brother do rough work?" Younger brother's body is so weak. It's precisely because he's weak that he has to do more work. Don't you see that your younger brother is much more energetic than before? If Gu Yan had not taken medicine every day, Yao Shi would have thought that her son was already a normal person. Gu Jinyu pursed her lips, but the imperial physicians all said that younger brother cannot work too hard. He needs to rest more. Yao Shi said, "Your older sister is a doctor. She knows what's best for Yan." Gu Jinyu gaped. She was just a medicine boy. How could she be a doctor? Gu Jinyu's gaze landed on the glutinous rice soup and mortar. This was nonsense. The glutinous rice soup was food, but Gu Jiao had used it to mend the mud. Otherwise, why would she say that she grew up in the countryside? She did not have any common sense. Gu Jinyu could not see it, but he endured and did not say, "Mother." "What is it?" Yao Shi asked. Gu Jinyu smiled and took out a golden seal and a book from his sleeve. He handed them to Yao Shi. Yao Shi was slightly startled. "This is—" "Open it and take a look," Gu Jinyu said proudly. Yao Shi opened the box with a golden seal and flipped it over. It was the imperial daughter's seal. Gu Jinyu waited for Yao Shi's praise. Yao Shi had heard about the bellows. Yao Shi did not understand the court's rules, but becoming an imperial daughter was an honor. Yao Shi nodded in satisfaction. "Mother, Jinyu is really amazing." Receiving Yao Shi's approval, Gu Jinyu was very happy. Not long after, the three siblings returned. The three were covered in dirt from pasting the wall. Their hair was covered in dust. Aunt Zhang carried a jar of pickled vegetables and walked in. She said to Yao Shi, "Yao, your children are really capable." They finished it in one go. The joy and pride in Yao Shi's eyes almost overflowed. She was even happier than when she saw Gu Jinyu's imperial daughter seal. Yes, they are all very capable. What was so good about pasting a wall? Gu Jinyu frowned. Gu Jinyu had brought many things bestowed by the emperor to show everyone the good news of her becoming an imperial daughter. However, other than Yao Shi's slight praise at the beginning, Gu Jiao's group treated Gu Jinyu and her valuables like air. Gu Jinyu did not feel the joy of showing off at all. The gold, silver, and jewels she had brought could not compare to a jar of worthless pickled vegetables. As expected, they came from the countryside and did not know what was good for them. At night, Gu Jinyu returned to the Marquis Fu. A servant girl told her that in the 4 hours she had been gone, many young ladies had come to visit and left gifts. They were all to congratulate her for being conferred the imperial daughter title. Gu Jinyu felt a little better. When Marquis Gu returned to the Fu, Gu Jinyu told him about her visit to Jade Water Alley. When she mentioned that Gu Jiao had pasted up a neighbor's wall, she especially praised her. Actually, older sister is also very capable. If Marquis Gu had been present at the time, he probably would have also felt that the three siblings were very capable. But when Gu Jinyu, who had invented the bellows, singled them out, there was a stark contrast. Marquis Gu snorted, "What's so good about pasting up a wall? She can only do this." Day after day, when I told her to go study, she wouldn't. She had to do these things that could not be shown in public. Can't she learn from you? Study well, play well, and be the eldest miss of the Marquis Fu. Gu Jinyu warmly said, "Older sister's happiness is most important." Marquis Gu snorted coldly. "She is happy. She had stolen his son." It was said that one was marked by the company one kept. He was really worried that Yan would become a country bumpkin if he spent all his time with that girl. Gu Yan, who was worried about becoming a country bumpkin, was now playing checkers with the #1 prodigy of Zhao country, Little Jing Kong. He had successfully lost the 18th round tonight. With a black face, he went to the study of the #1 prodigy of Zhao country to find his brother-in-law to play 5 in a row for consolation. In the end, he was defeated consecutively for 5 rounds. The heartbroken baby Yen went to old Madam's house to play cards with old Madam and her 2 mahjong buddies for a while. Old Chancellor also checked on his homework and completed his perfect, defeated, and pretentious, bitter day. The response to the first batch of golden sore medicine for the military camp was good. The military camp quickly placed a second batch of orders. Gu Jiao was busy earning money every day. Gu Jinyu was not idle either. The invention of the bellows had greatly stimulated her. She was exceptionally smart since she was young. She did not believe that she could not think of something that others could think of. Moreover, the bellows was just that. It was exquisite, but the principle was very simple. Wasn't it just increasing the wind to make the fire burn brighter? What was so difficult about that? Gu Jinyu had an idea. She took out a pen and paper and improved the ratio of the furnace to the bellows. She doubled the number of bellows. This would increase the firepower, and the effect of smelting iron would be higher. Gu Jinyu took the blueprint and entered the palace. She told Consort Shu her idea. Originally, it could be completed in a month. After the improvement, it can be completed in half a month. Oh my God, it's so fast? Consort Shu was shocked. Yes. Gu Jinyu nodded with certainty. This is like the water drains that the imperial court used in the past. Because the wind was not strong enough, the effect was not high enough. Consort Shu did not know much about this, but she heard that it was better than the current furnace. Naturally, it was a great contribution. Consort Shu led Gu Jinyu to the royal study to meet His Majesty. The borders had not been peaceful recently. His Majesty was discussing important matters with the military officials. If an ordinary person came, the eunuchs would not rashly announce it. But who asked this Princess Hui to be His Majesty's favorite? Eunuch Wei smiled and said, "Your Highness, please wait a moment. Princess Hui, please wait a moment. This old servant will go and announce it." Old servant? In the past, Eunuch Wei had called himself a miscellaneous person in front of Gu Jinyu. "Thank you for your trouble, Eunuch Wei," Consort Shu said. Gu Jinyu also nodded. Eunuch Wei took small steps into the room and whispered a few words to His Majesty. His Majesty was almost annoyed to death by the problems at the borders. Coincidentally, he also needed some exciting news. So he dismissed the military officials and called Gu Jinyu and Consort Shu in. And Gu Jinyu did not disappoint him. His Majesty was actually a layman, but he trusted Gu Jinyu. He immediately sent someone to send the blueprint to the Ministry of Works. The Ministry of Works Manufacturing Department looked at Gu Jinyu's blueprint with a suspicious expression. There are so many bellows. Will there be no problem? His colleague at the side said, "It's Miss Gu's blueprint. What problem can there be? His Majesty personally sent someone to deliver it. Hurry." Since it was His Majesty's order, there was no way around it. The manufacturing department immediately ordered his subordinates to improve the ratio of the furnace and bellows according to Gu Jinyu's blueprint. The results proved that the efficiency had indeed increased. They could produce almost 2 days' worth of goods in 1 day. His Majesty was very pleased. He rewarded Gu Jinyu, Marquis Gu, and the Ministry of Works. Gu Jinyu was in the limelight in the capital. Everyone praised her as the second wondrous woman after the Crown Prince Consort, and even faintly showed signs of standing shoulder to shoulder with the Crown Prince Consort. In the Eastern Palace, a junior palace maid spoke up for the Crown Princess. "Your Highness, is a wild girl from the countryside worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as you?" Gu Jinyu's background could not be hidden from the Eastern Palace. Now that she was a princess, there was even less need to hide it from the world. Not only did the commoners not discriminate against her, they valued her even more because of this. They thought that she was a commoner's princess. Not only did she not put on airs, but she also demonstrated to the world that even a pheasant could become a phoenix. The crown princess knelt on the cushion and calmly practiced her calligraphy. It was as if no matter how many storms she experienced, she remained as indifferent as a chrysanthemum. Being in the limelight for a moment is nothing. She has to be in the limelight for a lifetime to be considered capable. She did not express any dissatisfaction with Gu Jinyu's limelight at all. The crown princess had seen too many people in the limelight who disappeared in the blink of an eye like shooting stars. His Majesty's favorites came and went, but how many of them lasted? She would never be jealous of a woman who stole her limelight because she knew that it was all temporary. On a sunny afternoon, the old blacksmith and the carpenter finally arrived in the capital after a long journey of more than a month. They were escorted by officials all the way, so it was not too difficult. It was just that the old blacksmith was old and could not bear it. Because they were summoned by His Majesty, the officials did not dare to delay. After entering the capital, they took the two to the post house to bathe and change before immediately entering the palace to meet His Majesty. The two had not even been to the capital, much less the palace. Walking on the shiny white marble floor, the two did not even dare to breathe loudly. Lowly craftsmen like them had never dreamed that they would be able to meet His Majesty. They would really bring honor to their ancestors. The old blacksmith was nervous and excited. His old legs trembled as he walked. To be able to meet His Majesty. Aye, it is worth it even if I die here. The one who received them was Eunuch Wei, who served His Majesty. Eunuch Wei smiled and said, "You cannot say this word in the throne room. It is taboo." The old blacksmith hurriedly covered his mouth. Of course, he did not forget to glance at Eunuch Wei. He was clearly a man, so why did he speak so strangely? The carpenter was a young man in his early 30s. Young people adapted quickly, but he was so excited that he could not take care of himself. After taking 2 steps, he stumbled and almost fell. The junior eunuchs at the side covered their mouths and snickered. Eunuch Wei's eyes swept over them, and the junior eunuchs' expressions all became solemn. Eunuch Wei led them to the side hall. He respectfully reported outside the door, "Your Majesty, the craftsmen from the county town have arrived. Come in." His Majesty was in a good mood. The two had changed their clothes at the post house. The officials had also taught them the etiquette of kowtowing on the way here. As for whether they could learn it or not, that was another matter. The two had not yet seen His Majesty, but they felt their legs go weak just by hearing His majestic voice. "Please." Eunuch Wei smiled and reminded them. The two trembled as they stepped over the threshold. The palace was grand and untainted. The two did not feel like they had come to the imperial palace, but rather a fairy palace. "Kneel." Eunuch Wei saluted. The two fell to their knees with a plop. They had completely forgotten the etiquette they had learned earlier. The two brought out the strength they used to kowtow to their ancestors, and kowtowed 3 times to His Majesty. After they were done, the two wanted to light incense, but unfortunately, they did not have any. His Majesty was very magnanimous and respectful to his own people. He would not put on the sacred and majestic air in front of the courtiers. "You may rise," he said. The two, "Why is there this?" The officials did not say anything. The two of them looked at each other and suddenly lay flat on the ground. His Majesty, Eunuch Wei, His Majesty almost laughed out loud. Quickly help them up. Yes. Eunuch Wei also struggled to hold back his laughter and personally helped the old blacksmith and the carpenter up. They were 2 honest people. Otherwise, they would not have taught the blowing technique to the imperial court and the local craftsmen without hiding anything. This was also the reason why His Majesty decided to reward them. However, to His Majesty's surprise, they actually refused His Majesty's reward. The old blacksmith said sincerely, "It was not us who did it. It was that girl. If Your Majesty wants to reward that girl. We have received enough benefits. My iron shop is famous, and Cheng's shop also has endless business. We have never earned so much money in our lives. Now that we can see His Majesty again, we can die without regrets." When they returned to the county town, they would be people who had seen His Majesty. They could brag about it for 18 generations. The word death had always been a taboo in front of His Majesty. However, when it came from a commoner's mouth with such sincerity, His Majesty only felt happy. Once he was happy, he would reward them even more. His Majesty smiled and said, "If you have any other requests, just say it." The two had discussed it on the way here. The old blacksmith said, "We want to see that girl and thank her in person." That young lady was a noble person in their lives, so they had to thank her no matter what. His Majesty was in a good mood today and approved their request. Gu Jinyu was brought into the palace. Eunuch Wei wanted to give her a surprise, so he did not say who had come. He only knew that they were 2 old friends from the county town. Gu Jinyu wondered if she had any old friends in the county town. Could it be 2 servant girls from the manor? Was Yuru back? In the end, she saw 2 unfamiliar men. The 2 unfamiliar men were also looking at her. Gu Jinyu had an ominous premonition. She frowned, gathered her thoughts, and bowed. Your Majesty. His Majesty raised his hand to indicate for her to rise. He looked at the carpenter and the old blacksmith. Do you still remember them? Gu Jinyu was stunned. These two people, did she know them? The old blacksmith and the carpenter had the same doubts. That's right, did they know this girl? His Majesty teased the two. What's wrong? It's only been half a year, and you don't recognize your little benefactor? You even said that you wanted to thank her in person. Gu Jinyu's heart skipped a beat. The old blacksmith frowned. Your Majesty, you're mistaken. She's not that girl. Digression. The monthly votes have been a little low recently. Starry eyes, how about monthly votes? The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that you can't find online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_896/113736348. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikuga mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 203. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that cannot be found online are all available here. No one in the throne room dared to speak like this in front of His Majesty. Eunuch Wei's expression changed. Gu Jinyu's expression also changed slightly. However, it was not because of the other party's inappropriate choice of words. She forced herself to remain calm. His Majesty looked at Gu Jinyu strangely and said to the old blacksmith and carpenter, "She is Miss Gu." The carpenter had never seen Gu Jinyu before and could not comment. But the old blacksmith remembered clearly and waved his hand. "She is not. Miss Gu does not look like this." Eunuch Wei smiled and said, "Could it be that you have mistaken her? Take a look again." The old blacksmith had been working his whole life and did not know much about the ways of the world. He was not tactful, and when his temper flared up, he even forgot that he was talking to His Majesty. No need to look. Miss Gu stayed in my shop for an entire afternoon. How could I not remember what she looks like? Also, her voice is not like this. No, you are mistaken. Eunuch Wei smiled awkwardly. Are you sure that the lady's surname is Gu, and she is the daughter of the Marquis? Yes. The old blacksmith hurriedly nodded. When Xiao Sanzi went to the blacksmith shop to help Gu Jiao get the farm tools, the old blacksmith insisted on giving Miss Gu a bonus. Xiao Sanzi was pestered until he could not bear it and accidentally said, "Miss Gu is the daughter of the Marquis. Why would she lack your money?" Xiao Sanzi had let it slip, but after that, he was especially cautious and did not speak of it again. Eunuch Wei said, "But she is the daughter of the Marquis, and her surname is Gu. There is no other daughter of the Marquis with the surname Gu in this world." As he spoke to this point, he suddenly paused. No, there was a second. Marquis Gu's family had 2 daughters. One was his biological daughter, who grew up in the countryside, and the other was his adopted daughter, who grew up by his side. Although they were swapped, Marquis Gu had always treated his adopted daughter as his own, and this adopted daughter was very capable. If the swapping incident had not been exposed, no one would have suspected that she was not the real daughter of an aristocratic family. What Eunuch Wei guessed, His Majesty guessed it too. However, Marquis Gu once swore that his own daughter was illiterate. So, who was the one lying? The old blacksmith's expression was magnanimous, but Gu Jinyu's face was deathly pale. His Majesty's stern gaze landed on Gu Jinyu's face. "What do you have to say?" Gu Jinyu clenched her fists to prevent herself from showing her cowardice. "Your Majesty, I was the one who invented the bellows." The old blacksmith was anxious. You little doll, how could you lie? You didn't even go to my shop. If you don't believe me, Call them all over." The old blacksmith was not the only one at the blacksmith shop that day. The other blacksmiths had also seen Gu Jiao. "How dare you? This is the princess," Eunuch Wei reminded him in a low voice. The old blacksmith didn't care if she was a princess or not. He only knew that she wasn't the person he was looking for. She couldn't claim credit for herself. "Your Majesty." Gu Jinyu bowed and said, "It's true that this official's daughter has never been to a blacksmith shop, but this official's daughter did design the bellows." His Majesty frowned and said, "Then what did you say at the beginning?" Gu Jinyu lowered her eyes and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty only asked this official's daughter if the bellows were my invention. He didn't ask if this official's daughter had ever been to a blacksmith shop." His Majesty's frown deepened. "Then aren't you curious how someone else managed to make your own thing?" Gu Jinyu said, "I was curious, but I wasn't too surprised. After all, this official's daughter had mentioned it to many people. Even my personal maid knew about it." His Majesty's gaze was already suspicious. "Are you implying that someone stole your results?" "No, it's not like that." The old blacksmith refuted. "Miss Gu wouldn't steal." Gu Jinyu shook her head and said earnestly, "I didn't say that she stole. Perhaps she had good intentions and wanted to help you. So I don't blame that person." "Ah." The old blacksmith was stunned. He was smart, generous, and selfless. He had all of them. But the old blacksmith still felt that something was wrong. It had nothing to do with evidence. It was just his intuition, which he had lived for most of his life. Gu Jinyu had already made up her mind. She insisted that the inspiration was her own. If His Majesty wanted to investigate, he could only investigate the people around her. She had already bribed the maids, and they would provide her with favorable statements. More importantly, her father would definitely side with her. As for that girl, what evidence could she produce? Blueprints? Who didn't have them? She had already grasped the principles behind the bellows. If she really confronted her, it would be as if no one could win against that girl. But Gu Jinyu had never expected that just when she thought that she had victory in her grasp, the Ministry of Works suddenly sent bad news. The furnace for smelting iron had exploded. It had been the furnace that Gu Jinyu had modified with the bellows. It had only taken 3 days. To be exact, it hadn't even taken 3 days. This morning, the furnace had exploded. The explosion of that furnace had been so powerful that it had completely destroyed the furnace that the Ministry of Works had just built. This was not the scariest thing. The scariest thing was that there had been many craftsmen from the imperial court present. They had all been seriously injured by the explosion. The person who had come to report was a deputy supervisor from the Ministry of Works. He had rushed over from the scene. He had just gone to the latrine and was not near the furnace. Otherwise, he would have also been seriously injured. "Bring him in," His Majesty said in a low voice. In an instant, he no longer had that amiable aura. The old blacksmith and the carpenter both saw what was called the true might of the emperor. He sat on the wooden chair and exuded an unshakable aura. It was so oppressive that the two could not breathe. The deputy supervisor entered the side hall in a sorry state. His legs gave out and he knelt down. He concisely recounted the incident. When he mentioned that it was Gu Jinyu who had modified the furnace, he glanced at Gu Jinyu with a complicated expression. The blood drained from Gu Jinyu's face. The old blacksmith asked anxiously, "Why did it explode? How big is your furnace? How many bellows did you use?" The deputy supervisor did not know this commoner, but since he could appear in His Majesty's royal study and His Majesty did not stop him, he told him the truth. The old blacksmith lamented. Miss Gu said that such a big furnace could only use 2 bellows at most. Who told you to use 6? Aren't you courting death?" When Gu Jiao had taught the technique to the old blacksmith, she had naturally told him what to pay attention to. The old blacksmith had told the imperial court without reservation. "Why did you decide on your own?" The old blacksmith was very anxious. The deputy supervisor felt bitter because it was the princess' idea. She had invented the bellows. If she wanted to modify it, who would question her? His Majesty's gaze on Gu Jinyu suddenly turned cold. Gu Jinyu broke out in a cold sweat. She braced herself and said, "My design will not have any problems. There must be some other problem," the deputy manufacturing supervisor said. "No, we are strictly following the princess's blueprint." Moreover, the operation of the bellows was very simple. As long as it was connected correctly, there would not be any mistakes. At this time, no one wanted to be the scapegoat. His Majesty turned to look at the old blacksmith and the carpenter. "Sir, please go and take a look at the scene." The old blacksmith and the carpenter followed the deputy supervisor to the Ministry of Works. Gu Jinyu also went. The scene was a big fire. Thick smoke rose everywhere. It was a mess. The injured blacksmith was carried out by the guards with wooden planks. The bloody scene was too horrible to look at. Gu Jinyu only felt her stomach churning. She covered her chest and turned around to retch. Gu Jiao was resting today. The 4 men at home had all gone to school. The old lady had also brought the old chancellor out to play cards. She was alone at home. She had planned to take a break for half a day, but before she could rest for a while, Xiao Sanzi came. Miss Gu. Miss Gu. Not good. Something big happened. Gu Jiao said lightly, "Is Gu Chunglin not eating again? Or Gu Chungfeng defaulting on the medical fees again?" "Neither." Xiao Sanzi said in horror. The furnace in the Ministry of Works exploded. In Zhao country, there was no public hospital like in Gu Jiao's previous life. The imperial court had limited doctors. The largest was the imperial medical department, but there were not many people. The second largest was the medical officers in the military camp. They were far away from the fire. Generally, when such an emergency occurred, the imperial court would requisition doctors from the major medical centers in the capital. The miracle hall was also in the requisition scope. Gu Jiao took the medicine box and went to the scene with Dr. Song and 2 other doctors. The scene was more chaotic than Gu Jiao imagined. Amidst the thick smoke, there were injured people being carried out by the guards from the collapsed smelting room. Doctors from other medical centers had already arrived and were treating the injuries of several injured people. Gu Jiao was not in a hurry to treat the injuries. Instead, she took out the cloth strips of various colors that she had prepared in advance and handed them to the 3 doctors of the Miracle Hall. "Do as I said before." "Yes." The 3 nodded. Minister Zhao was originally outside inspecting the city's defense. When he heard that something had happened in the government office, he rushed back without stopping. Beside him stood a young man with an honorable aura. The young man was wearing a brocade robe. He was tall and had a cold face. Between his eyebrows, there was an aura of a superior. At this time, almost all of the injured people were carried out. There were dozens of people with light and serious injuries. The doctors from the major medical centers were treating the injured people. But among this group of people, there were a few doctors who acted differently. They were not in a hurry to save the patients. Instead, they quickly examined the patients. According to the severity of their injuries, they pasted different colored cloth strips. The patients with the red cloth strips were in critical condition. The patients with the yellow cloth strips were not lightly injured, but they were still conscious. The patients with the green cloth strips were slightly injured. They first treated the patients with the red cloth strips, then the patients with the yellow cloth strips, and finally the patients with the green cloth strips. Compared to the chaos in the other medical centers, their side was orderly and orderly. The young man slightly narrowed his eyes. Soon, he found a patient with a black cloth strip. He was lying quietly on the floor. The doctors came and went, but no one cared about his condition. "Is he dead?" the young man asked. Minister Zhao hurriedly ran over and used his hand to check the patient's breathing. He came back and reported, "He seems to still be breathing. But why aren't they treating him?" Minister Zhao expressed his confusion. The old blacksmith and the carpenter also joined in the rescue. Although the 2 did not know medicine, they could help get the person out of the ruins. In the thick smoke, there was a small figure that could not be ignored. She was wearing a blue robe and had a slender figure. Her sleeves were rolled up, revealing her white wrists. Her side profile was as perfect as jade, but there was a red birthmark on the left side of her face. Her white hand dripped through the blood. She was calm and composed. There was no panic or disdain in her eyes. The young man stared at her. "Who is that?" "Minister Jia said, 'Your Highness, that seems to be the female doctor of the Miracle Hall.'" The young man murmured, "Miracle Hall." The rescue efforts at the scene were in full swing, but Gu Jinyu was completely panicking. She really did not expect that the furnace she had modified would have such a big accident. There were dozens of injured people, and people were still being dug out of the ruins. At this moment, she really felt afraid. She did not dare to think about how His Majesty would hold her accountable. She seemed to be standing in front of a dangerous wall that could collapse at any moment. Her entire body began to tremble. In her panic, she noticed the injured person who was covered in black cloth. As if she had seen a life-saving straw, she quickly ran toward the injured person. She did not care about the ashes and blood on the ground, nor did she care about the injured person's mangled flesh. She knelt down next to the injured person. "Someone come. Is there a doctor coming to save him?" She cried out in despair, even shouting out the hesitation in her heart. Her elegant and clean dress was stained with blood. She took out a clean white silk handkerchief and held it in her hand. She lowered her head and carefully wiped the injured person. "Doctor, doctor," she cried out in a choked voice. She was a good person, not someone who disregarded human life. She had a conscience and a compassionate heart. She gritted her teeth and roared, "I am a royal princess. I order you to save him." This was the treatment area of the Miracle Hall. The doctors of the Miracle Hall were engrossed in treating the patients at hand. No one paid her any attention. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that you can't find online are all available here. https://www.zhpqg.com/89642_8964226/113707520. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhpqg.com Biku Pavilion's mobile reading website. zhpqg.com. Chapter 204. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more frequently. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. Don't move. It'll be done soon. Gu Jiao was cleaning a patient's wound. He was the first craftsman to notice that something was wrong with the furnace and hurriedly ordered people to run out. If it weren't for him, all the craftsmen who were blowing air would have been killed by the explosion. However, even though they escaped quickly and the furnace exploded quickly, many of them were seriously injured. Especially after this furnace exploded, the other furnaces also collapsed and the fire burned down the entire workshop. The loss of the imperial court was huge. "Doctor, will my leg be crippled?" the craftsman said fearfully as he lost feeling in his leg. Gu Jiao stitched up his wound. "No, I just gave you an anesthetic and you're temporarily unconscious. You'll feel pain after the anesthetic wears off." The craftsman was relieved and looked gratefully at Gu Jiao. He said weakly, "Miss, I'm fine, you can go treat the others, okay?" Gu Jiao nodded. She finished the last stitch and bandaged his wound. Then she walked to the next patient. Another patient's back was badly burned. Dr. Song was using the saline Gu Jiao gave him to clean the wound, but the wound was too big. It was Dr. Song's first time dealing with a patient of this level, and he was a little shaky. "I'll do it," Gu Jiao said to him. "You go and see the patient over there." "Okay." Dr. Song gave up his seat for Gu Jiao and went to see the other two patients with yellow strips of cloth. This patient had a red strip of cloth. His condition was critical. but he could still be saved. Gu Jiao squatted down and took a pair of scissors to cut off the rest of the clothes on his back. He hadn't completely lost consciousness, which meant that he was in great pain. Gu Jiao took out a painkiller from the small medicine box and was about to inject it into his skin when Gu Jinyu rushed over like a madman. He grabbed Gu Jiao's wrist and said hoarsely, "I've been shouting for so long, didn't you hear me? Someone over there is dying. Go and save him." In the past, in Gu Jinyu's heart, Gu Jiao was just a little medicine boy. But when it came to a critical moment, she actually started to rely on this little medicine boy. Gu Jiao looked at the hand holding her wrist in annoyance. "Take it away." It was too annoying to say another word. Gu Jinyu said self-righteously, "Aren't you a doctor? How can you leave him in a lurch?" She pointed at the patient lying beside Gu Jiao. "That person's condition is much worse than his. If we don't treat him now, he will die." Of course, Gu Jiao understood the man's condition. She was the one who tied the black cloth on him. He was a dying man, so there was no value in saving him. Saving him would only lead to the deaths of a large number of critically ill patients covered in red cloth. Seeing that Gu Jiao was ignoring him, Gu Jinyu exploded. "Are you going to watch him die? Do you still have a conscience?" Gu Jiao pried open Gu Jinyu's wrist and pricked the patient's arm with a needle. She freed her other hand and gave Gu Jinyu a slap. This was not the small slap she had suffered when she was fighting with Zhuang Mengdai in the small town. Gu Jinyu was slapped to the ground. Her right ear was ringing. The corner of her mouth was also cut. Her forehead hit a broken piece of wood and blood immediately flowed out. Gu Jinyu looked at Gu Jiao in disbelief. Gu Jiao had already given the patient an analgesic injection. She took out a piece of antiseptic dressing and covered the patient's wound. Her movements were very careful. After doing all this, she stood up and looked coldly at Gu Jinyu. "Now that you know he is dying, why didn't you do it earlier? You don't even know how much wind and air volume a furnace can withstand. Who gave you the guts to operate the bellows?" The blood drained from Gu Jinyu's face. Gu Jiao said coldly, "If you are ignorant, then find a place to die of stupidity. Don't come out to harm others." Gu Jiao had already seen the old blacksmith and knew the whole story of the accident. This was originally an accident that could have been completely avoided. The young man had seen everything that had happened between Gu Jiao and Gu Jinyu. "Find out who that girl is." Minister Zhao was about to respond when a hidden guard appeared out of nowhere and nodded. "Yes." Minister Zhao broke out in cold sweat. As expected of His Highness. Even his hidden guards were so elusive. The fire was spreading, and it was not advisable to stay at the scene for long. Minister Zhao also joined the ranks of the injured. Soon, Gu Changqing arrived with a group of guards. The 6 ministries and the Grand Council belonged to different factions. Strictly speaking, the accident at the Ministry of Works had nothing to do with the military camp. But when he heard that the doctor at the Miracle Hall had been requisitioned by the Ministry of Works, he led his personal guards and rushed over. Eldest brother. When Gu Jinyu saw him, it was as if she had seen another life-saving straw. She ran towards Gu Changqing with a face full of tears. Gu Changqing did not see her at all and rode his horse past her. He stopped not far from Gu Jiao and dismounted. He walked nervously towards Gu Jiao. "Are you okay?" Gu Jiao was changing the dressing for the patient. His injuries were too serious, and a piece of dressing was soaked in blood. Gu Changqing was a man, but he was secretly uncomfortable seeing this scene. He reached out his hand. "Give it to me." Gu Jiao shook her head and said to him, "There are still a few patients over there. Help move them. Send them to the medical hall?" Gu Changqing asked. "Yes." Gu Jiao nodded. Gu Changqing quickly ordered his subordinates to find wooden planks to carry the patients out. There was another patient who had only sprained his ankle and suffered some superficial injuries. Gu Changqing directly carried him on his back. He had only taken a few steps when he suddenly felt 2 gazes that could not be ignored fall on him. He looked over and saw a carriage parked outside the back door. That seemed to be, while he was thinking, there was a rumbling sound from the other end of the ruins. Gu Changqing's eyebrows twitched. At this moment, the old blacksmith shouted, "Oh no! The furnace is going to explode again." The fire was not controlled and burned the furnace in the other boiler room, causing the furnace there to explode as well. Gu Jinyu's face turned pale, and she ran away. How could she still remember the critically ill patients? It was more important to save her own life. Gu Jiao picked up the patient in front of her and quickly left the scene. Unfortunately, she was still a step too late. The moment she took a step, the furnace exploded with a bang. The moment the fire dragon swept over, Gu Changqing tiptoed and flew behind her. He used his body as a shield to block the attack of the fire for her. Gu Changqing's whole body was burning. Gu Jiao turned to look at him. "Get lost." Everyone was shocked. The military officer saved you, and you still want him to get lost? Gu Jiao said, "Get lost." Gu Changqing fell to the ground and rolled up. The fire on his body was quickly extinguished. Everyone who heaved a sigh of relief was stunned. Sure, you was stunned. So when you said get lost, it was really just the literal meaning of get lost. Gu Changqing extinguished the fire quickly and did not suffer serious burns. However, Gu Jiao still brought him back to the medical hall with the other patients. There were many medical halls that came to treat this time, including the second boss's old nest, Huichun Hall. Huichun Hall was one of the best medical halls in the capital. They had 6 doctors this time, but the number of patients they treated was not even half of the number of patients in Miracle Hands Hall. What was even more shocking was that the patients all proposed to go to Miracle Hands Hall for further treatment. "Shopkeeper, don't you think that young lady looks a bit familiar?" an elderly doctor said. Shopkeeper, he looked at Gu Jiao's back. He did not see the other party's appearance clearly, but he was very familiar with this situation. Wasn't this the little medicine boy that accompanied the second boss at the hot spring villa? Why was she here? The doctor said, "I heard that after the second boss left the Hu family, he opened a new medical hall in the capital. It seems to be called Miracle Hands Hall. Could it be the Miracle Hands Hall from before?" Shopkeeper, he said, "That's impossible, right? This Miracle Hands Hall's doctor is even better than our doctor." Where did he find such a good doctor? Shopkeeper, he felt that it was not possible. However, this Miracle Hands Hall had indeed stolen their Huichun Hall's business. When he returned, he had to report to his boss and let him pay attention to Miracle Hands Hall. The patients at the scene only received simple treatment. When they returned to the medical hall, those who needed surgery would need surgery, and those who needed treatment would need treatment. Gu Jiao was very busy and did not have the time to find trouble with Gu Jinyu for the time being. After Gu Jinyu fled the scene, she panicked and boarded the carriage, falling down. "Miss." The servant girl was frightened by her miserable state. Gu Jinyu's face was pale as she said, Quickly go find father." Marquis Gu was not in the Ministry of Works today. He had been sent to the western suburbs of the capital last night to survey the irrigation works, and would only return 3 days later. He still did not know that the Ministry of Works Yamen was in trouble. Because of Gu Jinyu's great merit, he had also risen in rank and became a popular figure in the Ministry of Works. Everyone had the right to to curry favor with him. He was happily surrounded by a group of colleagues who flattered him. Suddenly, a guard came over to report, "The imperial daughter is here." Marquis Gu personally went outside to welcome his daughter. "My good daughter, why are you here today? Did you specially come to see father?" He was shocked by Gu Jinyu's swollen face. Those who did not know would think that they had seen a ghost. "Father." After Marquis Gu boarded the carriage, Gu Jinyu told him about what happened at the Ministry of Works Yamen. "I really didn't do it on purpose. I didn't know that something would happen to the bellows. They all said that there was a problem with my design, but why was it fine at the beginning? And then something happened when those 2 people came. She made it sound as if the old blacksmith and the carpenter had something to do with the bellows accident. Gu Jinyu sobbed as she said, "They also said that I didn't make the bellows. It was elder sister who made it. How could that girl make the bellows?" Marquis Gu's face was full of disdain. Gu Jinyu said softly, "I don't know if elder sister saw my blueprint." Marquis Gu frowned. He vaguely felt that the girl was not someone who would do such a thing. But other than this, he could not figure out how she could make the bellows. "Did the old blacksmith really say that your sister told him?" "Yes." Gu Jinyu nodded. "That shouldn't be." Marquis Gu pondered. "Why would she peek at your things? She also doesn't know where your things are." Gu Jiao had been to the Marquis's residence and the mountain villa several times, but she had never entered Gu Jinyu's courtyard. Gu Jinyu did not expect her father to believe Gu Jiao at this time. She was stunned and said, "Perhaps elder sister also thought of how to make the bellows." "We all thought of it." Marquis Gu's intelligence was only online for a moment. He sighed. "Perhaps the two of you really have a telepathic connection. Don't worry, I will investigate the bellows accident. It might not be a problem with the bellows. It could be that the furnace has not been repaired for a long time. As for who invented the bellows, I will also report to His Majesty." Gu Jiao hugged his arm and said coquettishly, "Father, you really dote on your daughter the most in the world." Marquis Gu was very pleased. This was what a caring little girl was like. Unlike that lass, who seemed to be leaking air everywhere. She was simply a cold armor. Marquis Gu temporarily put aside his official duties and went to the palace to see His Majesty. His Majesty was listening to Minister Zhao report on the accident, the number of casualties, and the amount of damage at the scene. He was in a very bad mood. When he heard Marquis Gu say that the furnace's explosion might have been caused by the furnace and not the bellows, he wanted to throw Marquis Gu out. Marquis Gu did not know that he had ignited His Majesty's anger. He continued, "Rest assured, Your Majesty. I will definitely find out the truth. Also about the bellows, my two daughters have actually thought of it." After Marquis Gu left, His Majesty leaned tiredly against the back of the chair and raised his hand to massage his sore brows. The sky was dark and the surroundings were silent. The huge imperial study was dark and boundless, as if a giant beast had opened its dark mouth and swallowed him whole. After a long time, he sighed. "Wei Shun." "Your Majesty." Eunuch Wei walked in. "Do you want me to light the lamp?" His Majesty nodded. Eunuch Wei lit an oil lamp. Under the oil lamp, His Majesty's face was haggard and his expression was tired. With such a big matter happening, the one who was most upset was the ruler of a country. He softly said, "Your Majesty, please take care of your body." His Majesty asked, "Tell me, whose credit is the bellows?" Eunuch Wei dryly laughed. "Your Majesty already has the answer in your heart. Why bother asking this servant?" His Majesty said, "The old Marquis had served Jun for his entire life, but he still had to bear the crime of being disrespectful. Jun took away his military power and removed his armor." Eunuch Wei brightened the lamp. "That was for the country." His Majesty casually picked up a memorial from the table. "The Marquis of Ding, and wants to give the credit to his adopted daughter. This matter was this matter. The responsibility for the accident had to be investigated, but the credit for the bellows could not be erased. Those who should be punished would be punished, and those who should be rewarded would be rewarded." Eunuch Wei dryly laughed. "This old servant should not say this. It doesn't matter who made the bellows. In the end, it was the work of the Marquis Fu. I heard that the eldest Miss Gu had already gotten married in the countryside and County Princess Hui had not yet married. This was very thought-provoking. If a married woman only married a country bumpkin, the help she could provide to her maternal family was limited. If Gu Jinyu married into a noble family, His Majesty would be like a tiger that had grown wings. In terms of value, the credit should be given to Gu Jinyu. As for the accident, once the evidence came out, the Marquis Ding, and Fu would definitely have to take responsibility. His Majesty hesitated. "But wouldn't this be too unfair to the eldest miss?" Eunuch Wei earnestly said. "Her own father did not feel wronged. Why would your Majesty feel wrong for her? She is destined to be abandoned by the Marquis Fu. She will not be of any help to the Marquis Fu, and will not be of any help to your Majesty." His Majesty gave a self-deprecating smile. "Then is Zhen still a wise ruler?" Eunuch Wei said. "Your Majesty sacrificed one person to save the people from disaster. Why is it unclear? Why is it unkind?" "Your Majesty." A young pill apprentice called from outside the door. "You should take the pill." His Majesty gave Eunuch Wei a look. Eunuch Wei understood and walked to the door with his horsetail whisk. He extended his skinny hand and said in a sharp voice, "Give it to me." "Yes." The young pill apprentice knelt on the ground and handed the brocade box to Eunuch Wei with both hands. Eunuch Wei took the pill and entered. "Your Majesty, don't read the memorials for now. Take the pill." The young pill apprentice stretched his neck. He could not see the scene inside and could only vaguely see His Majesty take the pill from the silhouette in the window. He retreated with satisfaction. Once he left, His Majesty coldly snorted and threw the pill that he had not taken back into the box. With a face full of disdain, he said, "Get rid of it." "Yes." Eunuch Wei received the pill and put away. "Your Majesty." His Majesty's ears did not have a moment of peace before another young eunuch came. Imperial concubine, she was come to deliver a tonic soup. Venison, complete tonic soup. Good. It was another thing to seek favor. The inner palace had more porridge than monks. The monks had not been there for a long time. Which woman could stand it? But His Majesty was also very helpless. Eunuch Wei wanted to laugh, but did not dare to. It took him a lot of effort to hold it in. "Your Majesty, please bear with it. Didn't that little magic doctor say that you would be free of worries if you did not get sick for 2 years? It has been almost a year." At the mention of the little magic doctor, His Majesty's expression eased a little. He was bored in the palace, so he decided to go out for a walk. He left the palace in plain clothes and only brought Eunuch Wei with him. The master and servant wore the clothes of an ordinary master and a steward and walked openly on the street. There were not many people in the world who had seen the emperor's true appearance, so the two of them were not worried about being recognized. Walking on the streets, looking at the lights of thousands of houses, and seeing the people well-fed and well-dressed, the depression in His Majesty's heart finally dissipated a lot. Oh. As His Majesty was walking, a small ball fell over and rolled to his feet. Eunuch Wei was scared and opened his arms. "Protect His Majesty." His Majesty looked at Eunuch Wei speechlessly. "It's a child." The small ball pulled the hem of the clothes in front of him and stood up. He patted his little butt and looked down. "Oh, my shoe." One of his tiger head shoes was gone. That was his most beloved little shuzi. He ran around in a circle, but could not find his shoe. He was so anxious that he put his hands on his waist and stamped his feet. His Majesty was amused by his charmingly naive look and could not help but laugh. Little Jing Kong finally noticed the adult in front of him. He looked up at him, thought for a while, and said, "Handsome uncle, have you seen my shoe?" The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more complete. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with inner content that cannot be found on the internet are all available here. https://www.zhhbqg.com/89642_8964286/113704327. HTML Genius remembered the website address in 1 second. www.zhhbqg.com Bikuga mobile reading website. zhhbqg.com. Chapter 205. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels that can't be found online are all available here. Handsome uncle, this form of address was too interesting. This was the first time the emperor had been called this. All the flattering words could not compare to this child calling him handsome uncle. This child did not seem to be afraid of him. Although he traveled incognito, he had been sitting on the dragon throne for many years. He had already developed the aura of a dragon. When normal people saw him, they would feel a sense of fear. He squatted down. Eunuch Wei stopped him. "Master." The emperor raised his hand to stop him, indicating for him to shut up. He squatted down in front of little Jing Kong and looked at little Jing Kong at eye level. This child was too beautiful. She had a round little face, big, grape-like eyes, small eyebrows, and a small nose and mouth that were unbelievably good-looking. The last time he saw such a cute child was when Ahung was young. Facing this kind of child, no one could put on airs. The emperor could not help but reveal a gentle smile. "What is your name?" "Jing Kong." Little Jing Kong put his hands behind his back and tilted his head to think. He grabbed his lapel and said, "I am a student of the Imperial College." The emperor was extremely moved by this child's cuteness. Every little expression and action was extremely cute. The night was too dark, and he paid too much attention. At first glance, he felt that his clothes were a little familiar, but he did not think that he was a student of the Imperial College. After all, the children in the Imperial College were all 6 or 7 years old. This little ball looked to be less than 4 years old. He laughed. "Are you really a student of the Imperial College? How could the Imperial College have such a young student?" Little Jing Kong confidently said, "I am. I really am. If you don't believe me, you can test me." In truth, the emperor did not know what the Imperial College was, so he tested his chubby son on the 1,000-character classic and the 3-character classic. As a result, little Jing Kong crossed his arms and looked at him with a serious expression, giving such childish questions. "Are you looking down on me?" The emperor. The night wind in February was still very cold. Little Jing Kong lost one of his shoes and stood on the cold ground with his little feet. He was freezing. He put his right foot on top of his left shoe, but this made him unsteady. He swayed from side to side, and his little foot fell to the ground. He quickly lifted his little foot and put it back on top of his left shoe. This repeated over and over. The emperor suddenly felt sorry for his small foot. The emperor bent down and picked up the little fellow. Eunuch Wei was shocked. "Your Majesty, what are you doing? You are the ruler of a country, the true dragon, the son of heaven. How can you casually carry a commoner's child?" Little Jing Kong suddenly felt that he had become taller. He twiddled his fingers in his handsome uncle's arms. He couldn't let strangers hug him. But a little hug didn't seem to be a big deal. Uncle Handsome didn't look like a bad person. In Zhao country, there was a saying that one would hug a grandson, but not a son. Thus, the emperor had never even hugged his own son. Now, he was hugging a commoner's child. It turned out that a child's body was so soft and had a faint milky fragrance. "Where do you live?" the emperor asked pleasantly. Little Jing Kong pointed at the medical center. He lived in Bai Shui Alley, but he was going to the medical center now. His friends were all in the medical center. "Master." Eunuch Wei looked at the emperor worriedly. The emperor said, "It's okay." The public security around the Imperial College was very good. Besides, he also wanted to see if the emperor's foot was really clean and peaceful. "Let me carry him." Eunuch Wei reached out his hand. The emperor could even carry the country. How could he not carry a child? The emperor rejected Eunuch Wei and carried little Jing Kong to the medical center. The emperor didn't know that this was the medical center where the victims of the accident were. Little Jing Kong pointed him to the back door and directly entered Gu Jiao's small courtyard. In the courtyard, Qin Chuyu was eating heartily. He didn't expect that his father would arrive 3 seconds later. He had a stick of candied haws in his left hand and a bottle of milk in his right hand. He was sucking on it, and it was so delicious that it bubbled. "Chuyu," little Jing Kong called him. "Yes," he answered without thinking. When he looked up, he almost choked to death. The emperor and Eunuch Wei also saw Qin Chuyu. Qin Chuyu said, "Father, father, father." Eunuch Wei said, 7, 7, 7, 7. The emperor said, "Shut up." The two of them obediently shut up. Little Jing Kong looked at Uncle Handsome and then at Qin Chu. He felt that the two of them didn't look right. "Do you know each other?" He tilted his head and asked. It would have been better if he didn't ask. As soon as he opened his mouth, Qin Chu was jealous. He had never been carried by his father in his life. How could this kid take advantage of him? Qin Chu boldly glanced at the emperor. Seeing that the emperor didn't seem to have any intention of stopping him, he cleared his throat and said, "He's my father." "So he's your father." Little Jing Kong suddenly understood. In the countryside, the emperor had several grandchildren of his age. However, little Jing Kong was the eldest in the family. Moreover, he had seen Su Kanji's father. Su Kanji had a son at an old age. Su Kanji's father was older than Chu Yu's father, so little Jing Kong accepted this matter quite well. Little Jing Kong wiggled his little butt and got down from Uncle Handsome's arms. Qin Chu finally saw his feet. It turned out that his father carried him back because he didn't have any shoes. He felt a little better. Little Jing Kong said, "Your father is so good-looking." Qin Chu replied politely, "Your brother-in-law is good-looking too." Little Jing Kong, who didn't think his bad brother-in-law was good-looking at all. Little Jing Kong jumped into Jiao Jiao's room and changed into a new pair of tiger head shoes. Gu Jiao Jiao's courtyard was filled with little Jing Kong's things. From clothes, shoes, to toys, everything was available. As soon as the emperor appeared, Qin Chu became extremely nervous. He didn't dare to eat snacks or drink milk. He just stood there like a coward. The two people Qin Chu was most afraid of in his life were his uncle, Marquis Xianping, and the emperor. In fact, neither of them had beaten him before. On the contrary, Empress Xiao would occasionally hit his palm with a ruler when she was angry. The emperor was also quite depressed. At this moment, he really believed that the little fellow was a student of the Imperial College and was even his son's classmate. But how could an 8-year-old child play together with a 4-year-old child? Also, the sky was so dark, but he didn't go back to the palace. However, the emperor didn't embarrass his son in front of outsiders. Soon, Su Kanji came back breathlessly. "Jing Kong, where did you go?" Little Jing Kong ran out and shook his head with his hands on his hips. "I told you you couldn't catch up with me." "Ha ha ha. Who is he?" Although Su Kanji's father was a court official, he had never seen the emperor. "He's Chu Yu's father," little Jing Kong introduced. "Oh." Su Kanji greeted him politely. "Hello, Uncle Chu." Old man Su only told Su Kanji to play with Chu Yu. He didn't say that Chu Yu was a prince, so Su Kanji naturally didn't know that Chu Yu's surname was Qin. The two children didn't know Qin Chu Yu's identity. It seemed that they had made a real friend. The emperor's expression was not so strict. The three children played for a while more. Qin Chu Yu's servants came to take him back to the palace. They were all scared to death when they saw the emperor. The emperor didn't say anything and was about to take Qin Chu Yu away. Suddenly, a few women's shrill cries came from outside the courtyard. The emperor frowned. "What's going on?" Little Jing Kong sighed. "It's the patients' families. A lot of patients came to the clinic today. They were seriously injured. Their families are very sad." A lot of patients? An ominous premonition flashed through the emperor's heart. He gave Eunuch Wei a look. Eunuch Wei understood and went to the front hall to ask around. He didn't know if he didn't ask, but when he did, he was shocked. This miracle medicine hall treated dozens of government laborers and craftsmen who were involved in the accident at the Ministry of Works. Both the upper and lower floors were full. The emperor sent the three children away and let them go inside to eat. After listening to Eunuch Wei's report, the emperor's face suddenly darkened. When Minister Zhao reported the accident to him, he didn't mention that there were so many injured people. "Isn't there only a dozen? Most of them aren't seriously injured." He said that only 2 of them were seriously injured, and they have been properly treated. This was why the emperor had come to Jiangnan to visit incognito. In order to protect their official positions, the news they sent to him had all been filtered. The emperor of a country was blinded and would make the wrong decision. Eunuch Wei didn't dare to say anything. When Minister Zhao reported to the emperor, he already guessed that there were more casualties. The emperor probably guessed it too. However, he and the emperor didn't expect Minister Zhao to hide so much. This was too much. "I'll go and see for myself," the emperor said in a low voice. "You can't, Your Majesty." Eunuch Wei hurriedly stopped him. As a eunuch, he was terrified of those injured people. The emperor, as the emperor of a country, couldn't go and see such a scene. The emperor ignored Eunuch Wei's obstruction and strode out of the courtyard. As soon as he crossed the threshold, he unexpectedly met a strong figure. Military officer Gu. The emperor was surprised. Gu Chongqing came to see little Jing Kong and Gu Qinglin. Gu Qinglin was moved to Gu Jiao's small courtyard because the ward was too crowded. However, he had been lying in the room and didn't come out. Therefore, even little Jing Kong and the others didn't know he was in the courtyard. Gu Chongqing was also very surprised to see the emperor here. Gu Chongqing saluted with his hands folded. "Your Majesty." The emperor's gaze fell on his bandaged left hand and asked, "You also went to the scene of the accident?" Gu Chongqing said truthfully, "Yes, I heard the news on the way and brought a group of people there." The emperor nodded and assumed that he was here to escort the injured people. The emperor asked again, "Is your hand okay?" Gu Chongqing said, "It's not serious. It's just a superficial wound." The emperor looked at him steadily. "You went to the scene, so you should know the situation at that time. Tell me honestly, how many people died?" Gu Chongqing was a member of the military camp and didn't participate in the affairs of the 6 ministries. Logically speaking, he should avoid this topic. However, when he thought of the injured people and Gu Jiao almost sacrificing her own life to save them, he finally made up his mind and said honestly, 6 people are in critical condition, 13 are seriously injured, 37 are slightly injured, and 1, I don't know if we can save him. If we can't save him, there's only 1 person left." The emperor felt his vision go dark. Although he expected the situation to be more serious than what Minister Zhao said, he didn't expect it to be this serious. The patient that was being saved was the man that Gu Jiao had put a black cloth on. He was judged to be of no value. However, he was still breathing when everyone left the scene. Other medical centers didn't dare to take him, but Gu Jiao did. After the 6 critically ill patients were all out of danger, Gu Jiao began to save him. She had been saving him for 6 hours now. Whether there was a death or not, the nature of the accident was completely different. Everyone waited anxiously, including the emperor and Gu Chongqing. The emperor was worried about that life, and Gu Chongqing was worried about that life and Gu Jiao's health. Gu Chongqing brought a water bag over. The emperor looked at him strangely. After an unknown amount of time, the door finally opened. Gu Jiao walked out. She was soaked with sweat, and there wasn't a dry spot on her body. Gu Chongqing strode forward. "How are you?" His willpower is really strong. He saved his life for the time being, but he hasn't completely passed the danger. At this point, Gu Jiao realized that Gu Chongqing was asking about her. She paused. "I'm fine." She was just a little hungry. Gu Chongqing uncorked the water bag in his hand and handed it to her. "The food is ready. Go and eat something." Gu Jiao nodded and took a sip from the water bag. The emperor looked at Gu Jiao and was completely dumbfounded. He never expected to see her here. Wasn't this? Oh. Gu Jiao saw the emperor, but she didn't recognize him. Seeing the emperor's stunned expression, she asked, "Are you the patient's family?" The emperor was so stunned that he forgot to answer. Gu Chongqing knew that the emperor was traveling incognito, but he didn't know how to explain. Gu Jiao continued, "His condition is still unstable. He has to pass the critical period for 3 days." The emperor finally found his voice. Yes, he was wearing a bamboo hat at the time, so the little girl didn't recognize him. The emperor said, "I'm not his family." "Oh." Gu Jiao thought for a moment and said, "Are you from the Yamen to investigate the accident?" Without waiting for the emperor to speak, Gu Jiao nodded her head. "If you have any questions, you can ask me directly. You can also ask Dr. Song, Dr. Chen, and Dr. Li. We were all people who went to the scene. She didn't say that the investigation was useless or that officials don't make decisions for the people. She also didn't ask if she would get in trouble if she answered truthfully. She looked at him with frank and sincere eyes. The emperor was suddenly speechless. Gu Chongqing whispered, "I'll deal with the investigation. You go eat quickly." Gu Jiao felt that it was feasible and turned around to go to the courtyard. Only when she was far away did the emperor recover from the successive shocks. He remembered the way Gu Chongqing interacted with the other party. It didn't seem like it was the first day they met. He asked, "You know each other?" Gu Chongqing cupped his hands and took a deep breath before saying, "Replying to your majesty, she is this official's little sister." The emperor was shocked again. "Your little sister?" "Your little sister isn't," Gu Chongqing firmly said. "She is my biological little sister." On the carriage back to the palace, Qin Chu, who was tired from playing, fell asleep. He laid down next to the emperor. The little fatty's body was curled up like a little bear cub. Eunuch Wei used his hand to stop him from rolling off the bed. The emperor was completely immersed in an indescribable shock. The harvest from this trip was too great. The injured person's condition, the Ministry of Works concealment, and the little godly doctor who treated his venereal disease. And the little godly doctor was actually Marquis Ding's biological daughter. If that was the case, then the bellows was also her. Marquis Ding and Marquis Ding, and are you a stupid pig? After the emperor returned to the palace, the first thing he did was to have Minister Zhao roll over to his imperial study and ask him about the true casualties. Minister Zhao wanted to make a final struggle, but unexpectedly, the emperor directly threw the list of injured people in front of him. Seeing the list, Minister Zhao was stunned. Didn't he already issue a gag order? Which Brett that wasn't afraid of death had leaked the truth. The people in the Ministry of Works naturally did not have this courage. So the emperor did not have any hopes of starting with the Ministry of Works. He appointed Gu Chongqing. Many of today's patients had been escorted by Gu Chongqing's guards. He knew which medical centers they had been sent to and easily obtained the names of the patients. Among them, the Miracle Hands Hall had taken in the most patients. This included a dying patient and 6 critically ill patients that had been rejected by other medical centers. There were also 7 heavily injured patients and 10 lightly injured patients. Seeing the list, Minister Zhao's face turned white. Although the cause of this accident was Gu Jinyu messing with the bellows, as the head of the Ministry of Works, Minister Zhao was not without responsibility. The Yaman's time for work was at 7 in the morning, but the accident happened at 5 in the morning. In other words, those craftsmen were already working hard before the sun rose. When Minister Zhao reported the news, he delayed it by 2 hours in order to hide the fact that they had started work early. This was not the most frightening thing. The most frightening thing was that many of the injured were illegal workers hired by the government office. They were paid the least and did the most tiring and dangerous work. The court paid them the salary of regular craftsmen. So where did the difference in the salary go? The Ministry of Works had countless workshops of various sizes. This was just the tip of the iceberg. If the other workshops also had this kind of shady business, then it would be a terrifying amount. The emperor's chest was filled with anger. My eyes are blind, my ears are deaf. If there was such a despicable thing under the emperor's feet, then what about the entire country of Zhao? The national treasury was in deficit because they had raised these vermin. Minister Zhao desperately cowed out. Your Majesty, this subject did not know of this matter. This subject was negligent. Your Majesty, please give this subject a chance to forgive you. This subject will investigate this matter thoroughly and find the person behind the chaos. It would be strange if the emperor believed him. He had the imperial guards drag him away. The emperor trembled with anger. Eunuch Wei offered a cup of tea. Your Majesty, please calm down. The emperor fumed. Such a big thing has happened, and everyone treats me like I'm deaf, like I'm blind. How do you want me to calm down? Eunuch Wei sighed. Minister Zhao was actually useful. He had been the Minister of Works for 2 consecutive terms. His merits outweighed his faults. If not for the furnace and bellows incident, he would probably have been promoted next year. But he had run into that Miss Gu. Was it Minister Zhao who was unlucky, or was it all the people related to Gu Jinyu who were unlucky? Eunuch Wei helplessly shook his head. Thinking of something, he asked, "Your Majesty, about Princess Wei." Yes, there was still this problem. The emperor's head hurt. He pinched his sore brows. Summon her into the palace tomorrow. Early the next morning, Eunuch Wei went to the Marquis Fu and summoned Gu Jinyu into the palace. Gu Jinyu had learned her lesson and was more careful today. On the way to the imperial study, she secretly stuffed a heavy pouch into Eunuch Wei's hands. She warmly said, "Eunuch Wei, why did your Majesty summon me today?" Eunuch Wei smiled and put the pouch into his pocket. Gu Jinyu saw him accept it and was delighted. But she heard him say, "Princess will know when you go in. I don't dare to ask your Majesty's intentions." Gu Jinyu. After Gu Jinyu entered the imperial study, she respectfully bowed. "This official's daughter greets your Majesty." The emperor did not tell her to get up. He read through the memorials in his hand and left her hanging for a quarter of an hour until her legs were numb. Only then did he say, "Neither too fast nor too slow. The results of the investigation of the accident have come out. It was caused by excessive bellows. You personally modified it. Do you have anything to say about this?" Gu Jinyu had not slept the entire night. She had already guessed this possibility and had thought of what to say. She knelt down and kowtowed. She sincerely said, "This official's daughter is guilty." When this official's daughter was calculating the maximum amount of wind the furnace could withstand, she miscalculated a number. These were the words that Gu Jiao had used against her. She used what she had learned. "Thank you so much, elder sister." The emperor was very obsessed with arithmetic and astronomy. When he heard her mention this, he almost indicated for her to continue speaking. Fortunately, he remembered his purpose. "Then what about the bellows? Did you really invent the bellows? If not, do you know what crime you committed? If you tell me honestly, I can forgive you this time for the sake of the old marquis. Otherwise, if we really find evidence, Gu Jinyu, you know the consequences." The crime of deceiving the emperor was punishable by flogging or death. Gu Jinyu's heart was flustered. Didn't His Majesty trust her yesterday? Why did he suddenly suspect her? It was His Majesty who summoned Gu Jiao. And then what did Gu Jiao say about her in front of His Majesty? What an abominable girl! Although Gu Jinyu was very tempted by the emperor's suggestion, she still retained her last shred of clarity. This was His Majesty's trap. His Majesty could not find any evidence. If he could, he would have already punished her. Why would he force her to confess? As long as she refused to admit it, the invention was hers. Even though her mistake had led to a tragic accident, with the invention of the bellows, according to the laws of the Zhao country, her merits and demerits were offset. At worst, she would be fined a large sum of money, but she herself would not have to accept any punishment. She kowtowed and said, "Your Majesty, what I said is true. The bellows was invented by me." The emperor's fingers turned white from holding the memorial. Eunuch Wei looked at Gu Jinyu and then at the emperor. He shook his head and sighed. Gu Jiao did not have the first draft. She had drawn it on the ground, and it had been copied by a carpenter. Gu Jinyu was confident that she dared to insist that the bellows were hers. The emperor sighed and said, "All right, we believe you. You may rise." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Gu Jinyu slowly stood up. The emperor said, "You have reached the age to talk about marriage. The empress and noble consort Zhuang have found several outstanding men for you. Come and take a look." Gu Jinyu was startled at first, then she was overjoyed. She walked forward and said, "Yes." She came to the emperor's desk and reached for the portrait that the emperor had given her with his eyes. She swore that she did not touch anything, but the imperial jade seal on the table suddenly fell. It turned out that the imperial jade seal was pressing down on the portrait. On top of the imperial jade seal was another portrait. Gu Jinyu had taken the portrait that was being pressed down by the imperial jade seal. The imperial jade seal fell to the floor and broke a corner with a bang. Gu Jinyu's face turned pale. The emperor was very calm. He looked at the broken imperial jade seal on the ground and said faintly, "Oh, princess, this is the imperial jade seal. You broke it." "Your Majesty, no. I didn't. I didn't break it." Gu Jinyu panicked. The emperor snorted coldly. "If it wasn't you, was it we? We didn't even raise our hand. Everyone in the room saw it." Gu Jinyu looked at the emperor in disbelief. "Your Majesty," the emperor calmly took a sip of tea. "Deliberately breaking the imperial jade seal is a capital offense. Whether you did it on purpose or not, we will order people to investigate. Go to the prison and reflect. Guards, take the imperial daughter to the Ministry of Justice's prison." Gu Jinyu screamed, "Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty." Gu Jinyu was awkwardly carried out by the imperial guards. Eunuch Wei looked sympathetically at Gu Jinyu. Fighting with the emperor? Too inexperienced. The emperor's depression lessened. He had people put away the imperial jade seal that had been broken by Qin Chuyu. He said to Eunuch Wei, "In a moment, if Marquis Ding comes to plead for his daughter, have him go plead for his eldest daughter." Eunuch Wei's mouth twitched. Yes. The emperor's guess was correct. Marquis Gu really did enter the palace to plead with the emperor after hearing the news. Eunuch Wei stopped him outside the imperial study. Of course, he could not directly pass on the emperor's words. That would easily cause hatred between the emperor and the young divine doctor. As the head eunuch who had carved out a bloody path in the inner palace, Eunuch Wei had his own way of speaking. He slightly polished his words and said, "Because of the Ministry of Works Yamen, His Majesty did not sleep a wink and has just rested. Junju has made a great mistake and harmed so many innocent craftsmen. His Majesty is currently in a fit of anger. There is no use for Marquis to see His Majesty. Marquis' eldest daughter has performed meritorious service in treating the injured. If Marquis really wants to plead with her, it would be better to plead with her. If she comes forward, I believe His Majesty will be willing to grant her grace. That girl was just a little medicine boy. How could she treat the injured? She was just basking in the glory of the Miracle Hands Hall. Although he slandered her in his heart, his steps did not stop for a moment. He quickly rushed to the Miracle Hands Hall. It was still quite early. Gu Jiao had just finished changing the medicine for the injured person who had been bound with a black cloth. She then went to the other sick rooms to check on the conditions of the 6 critically ill patients. Everything was fine. She returned to the courtyard. The girls' school had started. The female student called Li Wanwan had begun practicing the guqin in the neighboring forest. Fortunately, it did not torture Gu Jiao's ears. Gu Jiao narrowed her eyes and lay on the rattan chair in the courtyard, listening to Li Wanwan play the guqin. Halfway through, the courtyard door was forcefully slammed. "Open the door." It was Marquis Gu. Li Wanwan was probably frightened, and the sound of the zither stopped abruptly. "Play yours," Gu Jiao said. The owner of the guqin did not ask why. She seemed to trust Gu Jiao very much and continued to play the guqin. Her guqin was very beautiful and could soothe the restlessness in one's heart. Marquis Gu, who was outside the door, had no time to appreciate the guqin. It was obvious that the door was bolted from the inside. That girl was in the courtyard, but he had been knocking on the door for a long time, and that girl did not respond. That girl was doing it on purpose. Marquis Gu was furious. "I know you're in there. Hurry up and come out. Jinyu has been taken away. Hurry up and save her." Gu Jiao scoffed and put one hand behind her head. What did Gu Jinyu being taken away have to do with her? Marquis Gu was not discouraged. Jinyu didn't do it on purpose. She didn't do it on purpose. She only wanted to improve the bellows for the good of the court. She also didn't expect such a big accident to happen. You're her elder sister. You can't let her go to jail. Oh, jail? Gu Jiao raised her eyebrows. When Marquis Gu heard that Gu Jinyu had been taken away, he lost his mind and forgot to ask what crime Gu Jinyu had been arrested for. He even thought that His Majesty was blaming Gu Jinyu in the name of the accident. Marquis Gu roared. She's your younger sister. Do you still have a conscience? Hurry up and come with me to the palace to see His Majesty. I beg His Majesty to grant you a favor and pardon your younger sister. Gu Jiao, Marquis Gu was furious. You, if you don't come out, I'll seal this medical hall. I'll see how you can continue to be so arrogant. Before he could finish, the courtyard door opened with a creak. A slender white hand reached out, revealing a white wrist that was as delicate as jade. She lifted her wrist and grabbed Marquis Gu's collar. Marquis Gu did not even have time to react before he was dragged into the courtyard. You brat, what are you doing? Marquis Gu's buttocks rubbed against the ground mercilessly. Gu Jiao's expression was indifferent as she dragged him, as if she was dragging a gunny sack. Without another word, she dragged him into the woodshed. She closed the door of the woodshed. On the other side of the courtyard wall, the sound of a zither was melodious. An indescribable scream rang out from the woodshed. Bang, bang, bang. Dong, dong, dong. Ka, ka, ka. Don't hit my face. The sound of the zither was melodious and mellow. When the last note was played, a certain someone in the woodshed had also finished punching his last fist. Gu Jiao opened the door and walked out of the woodshed, feeling refreshed. The sunlight shone in and shone on Marquis Gu's bruised and swollen pig head. He was like a puppet whose strings had been cut, leaning against the wall soullessly and sitting on the ground. Marquis Gu felt wronged. Boo-hoo. I said I don't like to be hit in the face. Digression. Can I ask for a monthly vote? I'm afraid that everyone has too many monthly votes and won't be able to finish voting by the end of the month. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that you can't find online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_8964286/113675639. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Biku mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 206. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels that can't be found on the internet are all available here. After Li Wanwan finished playing, she was a little worried about Gu Jiao. She actually heard some noise, but the girl on the other side of the wall didn't let her stop. So she had to bite the bullet and continue playing. After she finished playing, there was no more movement. She stood up, looked at the cold wall, and worriedly asked, "Miss, are you all right? You played 2 wrong notes." What answered her was a cold voice with a hint of coldness. Li Wanwan was startled. "You made such a big noise just now. Are you sure you didn't go to fight? You can tell that I made a mistake. What kind of ghost are you?" Then I'll play again," Li Wanwan whispered. Gu Jiao brushed her wide sleeves and once again lay back on the rattan chair, leisurely basking in the sun. This time, Li Wanwan was 120% alert and finally didn't make any mistakes. At noon, the patient with the black strip on him woke up. He was an illegal worker. This was confirmed by Gu Chongqing yesterday. In this accident, most of the people who were injured were illegal workers privately hired by the Ministry of Works. They all came from poor families or didn't have any family members, so they ended up like this. However, the other illegal workers at least had a friend come to visit them. But this person didn't have anything for 2 days. He was lying alone on the hospital bed, but his vitality was tenacious and stubborn. His burn area was very large, so he needed to use normal saline to clean the wound every day. It was as painful as scraping his flesh. Dr. Song had just changed his dressing, but he didn't know if it was because his hands were too unfamiliar. But the pain woke him up. Leave this to me, you go see the other patients. Gu Jiao carried a small medicine box into the room. Okay. Dr. Song wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and left the room. Gu Jiao had put black strips on a lot of people. This was a helpless choice, but it was a choice that had to be made. Their survival rate was almost zero, and treating them would lead to the death of a large number of critically ill patients who could be saved. Among all the patients who were judged to have no value in saving, only this one survived. How do you feel? Can you hear me? Gu Jiao put the medicine box on the bedside table, took out a small flashlight, and shone it into his eyes. His pupils responded well. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but his throat was too hoarse and he couldn't make a sound. Gu Jiao understood. She took a tongue depressor and looked at his throat. There's a slight edema and some inflammation. It's not a big problem with some medicine. You'll be able to speak in a few days. Can you hear me? If you can, blink your eyes. He blinked his eyes. His anti-inflammatory medicine was finished, and there was still a bag of rehydration fluid to replenish his electrolytes. Gu Jiao changed the rehydration fluid and adjusted the titer. This bottle is finished after the injection. I'll come back later to pull out the needles for you. Gu Jiao said, packed up the medicine box, and turned to go out. The man's mood suddenly became agitated. Gu Jiao pinched his wrist. His injury was too serious, and his pulse was too fast. It was easy for something to go wrong. Gu Jiao gently comforted him. Don't be agitated. Your injury can be cured. Our medical center will do its best to treat you. You don't have to worry about the medical expenses. The government will pay. However, he was still very agitated. Gu Jiao thought for a moment and asked, Do you want to ask about someone else's situation? If yes, blink your eyes. If not, close your eyes. The man blinked his eyes. Gu Jiao said, Your companion? A craftsman from the government? The man closed his eyes. Gu Jiao family? The man hesitated for a moment and blinked his eyes. Gu Jiao said, Do you want to ask if your family has come to see you? The man closed his eyes. He had a family, but he didn't ask if his family had come to see him. He was very worried about his family. Is there someone in your family? Gu Jiao asked. The man blinked his eyes heavily. The man couldn't speak, so Gu Jiao had to take the map of the capital. However, Gu Jiao wasn't familiar with the capital, so she couldn't figure out where he was referring to. Gu Chongqing came to the medical center today to find the craftsman who had woken up to investigate the accident. When he heard about Gu Jiao's situation, he came over and said to her, Let me ask. The map of the capital only detailed the streets and not the alleys and houses. Gu Chongqing had been patrolling the capital all year round and was familiar with every corner of the capital. Otherwise, if it was someone else, they wouldn't be able to ask where the man lived. I know. I'll go and inform your family. Gu Chongqing returned the map to Gu Jiao and turned to leave the medical center. Gu Chongqing found the man's residence in the dirtiest and poorest suburb of the capital. It could no longer be called a residence, but a shack that could barely shelter him from the wind and rain. The shack was a mess and empty. There was only the sound of heavy breathing coming from a broken cabinet that was picked up from outside. Gu Chongqing subconsciously pressed down on the sword at his waist. He walked over to the cabinet and carefully opened the door. He saw a little girl with disheveled hair. The little girl was sitting in the cabinet. Her face was dirty and her clothes were tattered. She held a rusty knife in her hands and looked at Gu Chongqing in horror. Gu Chongqing looked at her deeply and stretched out his hand to her. Jiang sure asked me to pick you up. Gu Chongqing brought the little girl back to the medical center. Jiang Sure was the name that the man registered in the government office. He was an illegal worker, so the possibility of him being an illegal resident was very high. This name might be an alias. The little girl was Jiang Shure's younger sister. She was thin and small and looked only 5 years old. However, after Gu Jiao checked her teeth, he found that she was already changing teeth. She had 2 permanent teeth, 1 molar, and even the side incisors were beginning to sprout. The side incisors usually sprout at the age of 8 or 9. In other words, she should be at least 8 years old. Gu Jiao also checked her body. Other than being malnourished, she had no other problems. It was just that she was very timid and didn't talk to others. The second boss picked a young maidservant who had a good temper, a good appearance, and seemed to be quite amiable. He had the young maidservant take her to bathe and eat. He also bought her a few new clothes out of his own pocket. The second boss also arranged a separate room for her, but she didn't want to stay there. She wanted to stay with her brother. Xiao Sanzi, make a bamboo bed for her, the second boss ordered. Okay. Xiao Sanzi moved a bamboo bed in and placed it next to Jiang Shi's bed. He spread a thick mattress and made a temporary bed for the little girl. The little girl sat on the bed and looked at her brother from time to time. Her brother also looked at her, his eyes full of gentleness. Gu Jiao couldn't help but think of the words he heard in the organization when he was a secret agent in his previous life. Don't fall in love with anyone and don't have any worries. Once people have worries, they won't dare to die. The little girl leaned on the railing of the bed and held her brother's hand. She knew that her brother was injured, but she didn't know what kind of danger he had gone through. She also didn't know how much willpower her brother had used to crawl back from hell. Because I'm worried about you, I can't let you die. On the other hand, the emperor knew that Marquis Gu's pleading had been unsuccessful. He didn't know about the situation in Gu Jiao's courtyard. He wasn't so crazy as to spy on the little divine doctor. He only sent someone to keep an eye on Marquis Gu. Marquis Gu entered the clinic on his feet and left lying down. He was found by his subordinate, Huang Zhong. Huang Zhong skillfully carried him onto the carriage. According to the spy's report, it was tragic. The emperor, did he fight with someone? Eunuch Wei, we don't know. We don't dare to ask. However, looking at Marquis Gu's tragic state, his pleading must have failed. The emperor had a rough idea of the little divine doctor's attitude towards Gu Jinyu. The emperor put down the mountain of memorials. All right, let's go to the clinic. He had something to ask the little divine doctor in person, and his illness. The little divine doctor had said that he would have a checkup every 3 months for a total of 2 years. Eunuch Wei asked, "Is your majesty still traveling incognito? Do you want to wear a bamboo hat this time?" It was necessary to travel incognito. As for the bamboo hat, the emperor thought for a while and wore it. Eunuch Wei had appeared at the clinic yesterday, so the emperor didn't bring him. Instead, he brought Eunuch He, who had accompanied him to the county town. Eunuch He was an inconspicuous eunuch. He didn't even work for the emperor. It was hard for ordinary people to associate him with the emperor. Eunuch Wei felt jealous in his heart. Every time for such an important mission, the emperor would bring along that old bastard, Old He. To think that he had served the emperor so well. Even the trip to Jiangnan had nothing to do with him. The emperor had only mentioned the little magic doctor after the event. Eunuch He and the emperor, who was wearing a bamboo hat and a veil, appeared at the clinic together. The second master and shopkeeper Wang had seen Eunuch He and the man in the bamboo hat. However, that was in the small county town. At that time, they were held by a group of martial arts masters. The memory was still fresh. Seeing the two of them again, the second master and shopkeeper Wang instinctively shivered. What's wrong with them? How much hatred did they have against them? Why did they chase them all the way from the county town to the capital? The second master and shopkeeper Wang misunderstood. The emperor didn't bring any martial arts masters with him this time, only the second master and Eunuch He. The emperor lowered his voice and asked in a low voice that he used to talk to people in the county town, "Is that girl here?" Shopkeeper Wang realized that the emperor was asking about Gu Jiao, who had treated him. He pointed at the backyard and said, She's in the back." Before he could finish his words, the emperor had already left with Eunuch He. He went to Gu Jiao's yard with ease. However, the first person he saw was the child he had met on the street last night. The little guy was wearing the elementary school uniform of the Imperial College. He stood at the gate of the yard with his face scrunched up. It seemed that he was worried about something. Jing Kong. The emperor walked over. The little Jing Kong frowned and looked up at him strangely. Do you know me? Only then did the emperor remember that he was wearing a bamboo hat with a veil. He smiled and said, the people in the clinic told me. Are you Jing Kong? Yes, I am. The little Jing Kong nodded. The emperor liked this child very much, not only because he was cute, but also because he had done him a big favor. If he hadn't brought him to the clinic by chance, he might not have found out the truth about the accident and the bellows. He already knew that the little Jing Kong was the little miracle-working doctor's younger brother. However, he didn't know that Marquis Gu had a younger son among the common people. He didn't know where this younger brother came from. He asked pleasantly, Is your sister here? Are you looking for Jiao Jiao? The little Jing Kong spread his hands. Then you may have to wait. She's treating someone. The emperor asked, What illness? The little Jing Kong said, Bird disease. The emperor was slightly stunned. The little Jing Kong sighed. Alas, these adults are always fooling around outside. They go to Jiao Jiao and break the birds. Then they come to Jiao Jiao to look after the birds. Jiao Jiao is very busy. How can she have time to look after the birds for you stinky men every day? The stinky man learned this from Auntie Zhang next door. He was now at the age where he was learning to speak. He couldn't distinguish between good and bad words. When he heard something, he said it. He even mastered the sharp tone of his words perfectly. The emperor didn't think about it at first, but his expression and tone made him think twice. He broke out in a cold sweat and wondered if this disease was so prevalent in the capital now. Then he saw a few men coming out with bird cages. Thank you, Miss Gu. We'll be careful. We won't feed the birds anymore. The men thanked Gu Jiao Jiao and left with myna, parrot, thrush, and other lovebirds. They were finally saved. The corner of the emperor's mouth twitched. So the birds you mentioned were literally birds? The little Jing Kong ran over and pointed at the emperor outside the door. Jiao Jiao, someone is looking for you. Gu Jiao Jiao looked at the emperor. The emperor was wearing a bamboo hat, so he wasn't worried that she would recognize him. However, a young man who was carrying a bird cage accidentally twisted his foot. The young man reached out and grabbed the emperor's bamboo hat off. His face was exposed with a whoosh. At the critical moment, the emperor pushed Eunuch He into the grass. Eunuch He, who suffered an unexpected disaster, was dumbfounded. The little Jing Kong exclaimed, Uncle Chu, it's you. He said to Gu Jiao Jiao, Jiao 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 Jiao. He's the handsome uncle from yesterday. He's my classmate's father. Gu Jiao Jiao didn't see Eunuch He. Based on the bamboo hat that fell on the ground, she didn't think that he was the special patient she treated in the county town. Gu Jiao Jiao. Oh, so the official from yesterday is the little fatty's father. The emperor smiled. He was about to cry. Gu Jiao Jiao asked, Are you here to investigate? Yes. The emperor braced himself and answered. Gu Jiao Jiao said to the little Jing Kong, You can play in the yard for a while. Okay, Jiao Jiao. The little Jing Kong was a sensible child. He knew that Jiao Jiao was busy, so he skipped away to play. Gu Jiao Jiao brought the emperor into the central room and poured him a cup of tea. The emperor looked at the big bowl in front of him and thought that the little magic doctor had a good taste. What else do you want to know? Gu Jiao Jiao asked. Although Gu Chongqing said yesterday that he would handle the investigation, it was hard to guarantee that the government would collect evidence from many aspects. The emperor did have something to ask her. Since he brought it up, he said, I'm here for the matter of the bellows. I heard that you invented the bellows, and your sister falsely claimed your credit. You're wrong, Gu Jiao Jiao said. The emperor was stunned. Gu Jiao Jiao said, She's not my sister. She didn't admit it. The emperor smiled embarrassedly. So it was this. He was scared to death. He thought that she didn't invent the bellows. Gu Jiao Jiao continued, Also, I didn't invent the bellows. The emperor had just taken a sip of tea and almost choked when he heard this. Is she really your sister? Not her either. Gu Jiao Jiao said, I learned it from someone else. The emperor's heart skipped a beat. Someone else? From the Liang Kingdom? Among the 6 countries, the Liang Kingdom was the most advanced in manufacturing. No, not in this world, Gu Jiaojiao said. When Gu Jiaojiao said not in this world, the emperor automatically interpreted it as her missing a word. The complete sentence should not be in this world. The emperor's thoughts were one level deeper than the Marquis of Dingen. He had seen Gu Jiaojiao's medical skills. Gu Jiao was definitely not a normal country girl. Of course, the emperor could not guess that Gu Jiao was a soul that came from another world. He only thought that Gu Jiaojiao had met a hidden expert and was taken in as a disciple. Only, that expert had already passed away. If the emperor thought this, it was not bad. It would save Gu Jiaojiao the trouble of explaining. The emperor suddenly smiled. You girl, you really aren't greedy for credit. Gu Jiaojiao did not have any interest in these so-called credits. Her original intention was to have her ironwork come out as soon as possible. Is there anything else to investigate? She asked. The emperor hesitated a bit and took a deep breath. He smiled and said, no. He stood up and left. Gu Jiao lightly opened her mouth. You're not going to see a doctor? The emperor turned his head. Ah. Gu Jiao pointed at her own small medicine box. You've been staring at my medicine box. Could it be that you don't want to see a doctor? In truth, the emperor had only looked twice. When he came, he looked once. When he left, he looked once. If it was any other girl, they definitely would not have noticed. Otherwise, why would he say that she was amazing? The emperor cleared his throat. Cough, it's not a big matter. It's just that I kicked off my blankets in the middle of the night and caught a cold. I have a headache and a fever. Gu Jiao, take off your pants. Emperor, hey. Wait, it seemed like something was wrong. When Gu Jiao opened the small medicine box, she found that there was an extra syphilis test paper inside. The patients in the medical hall did not need this. There were no visible lesions on the surface of their bodies. They were the same as normal people. But after being together for a few days, she had gradually figured out the pattern of the medicine box. There would not be anything in the medicine box that she did not need, other than those random birth control items. So there was only one possibility. This person was a healer. In order to further confirm her diagnosis, Gu Jiao took his blood and tested the titer with the test paper. It was true. Seeing that he had recovered well, the emperor raised his eyebrows and said proudly while tying his pants, "You're wrong. I don't have this problem." Gu Jiao took off her gloves. Come back for a checkup in 3 months. The emperor, okay. The emperor went back to the palace in high spirits. He did not know why, but it seemed that every time he came to the small and quiet courtyard of the medical hall, he would be in a good mood. It was as if all his troubles would disappear as soon as he came out of the courtyard. On the way back, he thought a lot about the young magic doctor and Qin Chuyu. When he sent Qin Chuyu to the Imperial College, it was because he found that he was spoiled by the Empress and the people in the palace. He already had 6 sons and the Crown Prince. It did not matter if Qin Chuyu was successful or not. So, he just left it up to fate to let Qin Chuyu study. The most important thing was to change his personality. But Qin Chuyu was classmates with the young magic doctor's younger brother. Now that she thought about it, Qin Chuyu had actually changed recently. The number of times he cried had decreased, and the number of tyrannical deeds had decreased as well. Yesterday, he casually flipped through his homework. At that time, he was hiding something and did not pay much attention to it. Now that he thought about it carefully, his handwriting seemed to have improved. His thoughts seemed to have run away. The emperor pulled his thoughts back and began to think about the young magic doctor. It was one thing for the little divine doctor to not care about the merit, but it was another thing for the merit to be falsely claimed by others. He had originally intended to give Gu Jinyu a light punishment on account of the old duke's dedication to him despite his age. But now, he would let her stay in the Amen. Also, there was the reward for the young magic doctor. The emperor thought for a long time and felt that it was too vulgar to be worthy of the young magic doctor. She also did not care about the false reputation. The emperor swore that he would choose gifts for the concubines of the 6 palaces. After 2 hours of careful selection, the emperor finally chose a suitable gift for the young magic doctor. The emperor asked Eunuch Wei to go to the medical center and give the gift to the young magic doctor. Eunuch Wei said with a pleasant expression, "My master went to the palace to see His Majesty and told His Majesty about Mississippi. His Majesty said that the credit for the bellows belongs to Mississippi Miss. Please accept His Majesty's reward." Gu Jiao was curious about what the emperor gave her. After Eunuch Wei left, she immediately opened the box. It was such a big and exquisite box, but it was full of decorations. There was only a brush lying in it. Gu Jiao, who was harmed by the brush, was speechless. This was not an ordinary brush. It was the emperor's imperial brush. There was the emperor's personal seal on it, and the emperor's fingerprints that he had used for many years. This was something that all the scholars and concubines of the 6 palaces wanted. However, in Gu Jiao's eyes, wasn't this just a brush? It was a second-hand brush. Gu Jiao, who did not want to write with a brush, despised it so much. She sold the emperor's imperial brush. The buyer was Zhuang Mengdai. This is the imperial brush. You really want to sell it? No matter how stupid Zhuang Mengdai was, she could recognize that this was something used by the emperor. No one in the world would dare to fake it. Gu Jiao said, "Do you want to buy it or not? If you don't want to buy it, I will sell it to someone else." "Who said I don't want to buy it?" Zhuang Mengdai grabbed the brush. "Name a price." Gu Jiao said casually, 5,000 taels. Zhuang Mengdai stared. "So expensive." Gu Jiao reached for the brush. "Don't buy it if you think it is expensive." Zhuang Mengdai held the brush tightly. I will buy it." Gu Jiao replied, "I'm going back on my word. 7,000 taels." Zhuang Mengdai. Gu Jiao finally sold the second-hand brush at the price of 8,000 taels. There was another thing in the box. It was a golden plate. She did not know what the plate was for, but it was made of pure gold. Gu Jiao kept it. Little Jing Kong liked gold. She would give it to him to play with later. Gu Jiao did not go to Hofu for a few days. In fact, she used to go there less often, but now she felt that it was not enough. After she sent little Jing Kong back to buy Shui Alley, she planned to go to Hofu. Coincidentally, Gu Chongqing came with a pair of birds. Well, they were not for them to play with, but to make food for the baby eagles. Yes, the baby eagles were much bigger now. They were not satisfied with chicken feed. The brother and sister went back to Hofu. Before they parted, Gu Chongqing stopped her. "I have blocked the news about the incident in the Yamen and Gu Jinyu. Madam does not know about it for now." Gu Jiao said, "Thank you." Madam Yao could not take any provocation. Gu Chongqing opened his mouth. "You don't have to be so polite with me." Gu Jiao looked at him strangely. It seemed easier to admit it in front of others. Gu Chongqing clenched his fists, and a trace of uneasiness flashed across his face. "You are my younger sister." After he said that, he seemed to be afraid that Gu Jiao would refuse or laugh at him. He did not wait for Gu Jiao's response, and left without looking back. Gu Jiao looked at his back. Oh, at this time, the residents had just finished dinner, so it was still early. However, when Gu Jiao arrived at Madame Yao's courtyard, Madame Yao had already fallen asleep on the chaise lounge. She was holding an unfinished garment in her hand. It was Gu Jiao's summer dress. Nanny Fong carefully took the garment from her hand. When she turned around, she saw Gu Jiao walk in. She whispered, "Eldest Mississippi." Gu Jiao walked lightly to the chaise lounge. She looked at Madame Yao and said, "Madame is sleeping so early?" Nanny Fong successfully took out the garment, tied the needle and thread, and put it in the embroidery basket, saying, "Yes, I have been sleepy recently." Gu Jiao sat down on the chaise lounge, brightened the oil lamp. "Okay." Nanny Fong used a piece of iron to stir the wick in the oil lamp. Gu Jiao checked Madame Yao's pulse and asked Nanny Fong, "How is Madame's appetite?" "Not very good." Nanny Fong said. "What about your menstruation?" Gu Jiao asked. "It just came a few days ago." Nanny Fong said, "Eldest Miss suspects that Madame." Gu Jiao gently put Madame Yao's wrist under the quilt. "It's not a suspicion." "HM?" Madame Yao woke up in a daze. When she opened her eyes, she saw Gu Jiao. She was stunned and thought that she was dreaming. Jiao Jiao? Yes, it's me. Gu Jiao nodded. Madame Yao's mood became very good. She sat up and pulled Gu Jiao's hand. When did you come? Have you been here for a long time? Why didn't you wake me up? Gu Jiao said, I just came. Madame Yao looked at the sky. You haven't eaten yet, right? I'll have someone set the table. There's no hurry. Gu Jiao looked at her. Madame Yao vaguely felt that Gu Jiao had something to say. Jiao Jiao, is there something wrong? Gu Jiao nodded, and her eyes fell on her flat belly. You are pregnant. Madame Yao was shocked. She was pregnant? How could she be pregnant? When she gave birth to Yan and Jiao Jiao prematurely in the temple, after returning to the capital, the doctor said that she gave birth prematurely. She didn't take care of herself well, so her vitality was damaged. It would be difficult for her to get pregnant again in this life. Madame Yao looked at her belly in disbelief. Madam has been taking medicine. Will there be any problems? Nanny Fong thought of Madame Yao's antidepressants. Gu Jiao shook her head. It's fine. She had already changed her medicine to vitamin and calcium tablets. Nanny Fong put her hands together. Amitabha, Bodhisattva bless you. Madame Yao still found it hard to digest this fact. It wasn't that she didn't like this child, but she looked at her belly and then looked at Gu Jiao. A trace of anxiety flashed through her eyes. Jiao Jiao, do you want a younger brother or sister? Gu Jiao seriously thought about it and nodded. Anne, after learning that she was pregnant, the first thought that flashed through Madame Yao's mind was whether Jiao Jiao and Yan could accept it. If they didn't accept it, then it meant that she didn't give them enough love. She didn't have the right to have another child. Yan will also like it, Gu Jiao said. How do you know? Madame Yao asked. Fraternal twins. If Gu Yan didn't like it, then she wouldn't like this little life at this time. She could feel that there was another kind of joy in her heart. It was Gu Yan's joy. Madame Yao touched her belly. Was there really a little life here? Did she have another chance to be a mother? Madame Yao thought of something and said, but I just had my period a few days ago. This kind of situation is relatively rare, but it's not impossible. Is my fetus unstable? No. Gu Jiao shook her head. The pulse of pregnancy is very strong. When her mood improved, her body would naturally improve. In the past, she didn't even have enough time to worry about Gu Yan, so how could she have the energy to properly care for herself? After Gu Jiao took care of everything, her body also improved day by day. Come live with me. Gu Jiao suddenly looked at her and said seriously, it's not because you don't have a place to go, and it's not because I'm forcing myself to accept you. I really want you to move over. As she said this, she paused and lowered her eyes. She was a little unaccustomed to the unfamiliar feeling in her heart. She twiddled her fingers. At night. I will miss you. Madame Yao's eyes immediately became moist. Her nose became incomparably sore, and her throat began to hurt. These words moved her even more than hearing that she was pregnant. She covered her mouth, not allowing herself to cry out loud. Her Jiao Jiao, how could it be so good? On the other hand, after Marquis Gu was beaten beyond recognition, he spent an entire afternoon in a daze in the carriage before waking up. The first thing he did was go to Madame Yao's place to find comfort. After being beaten so badly by that girl, only seeing Madame Yao could comfort his wounded heart. However, when Marquis Gu returned to the manor, what awaited him was an empty courtyard. Madame Yao was nowhere to be found. Where was his wife? The newest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that cannot be found online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642826/113648110. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www ZHHBQG. Com BQG's mobile reading website. ZHHBQG. Com. Chapter 207. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. The novel will be updated even faster. Millions of novels will be read for free. There are all kinds of novels that can't be found online. Yaoshi moved to Bisui Alley. The whole family was very happy and welcomed her arrival. Yaoshi didn't bring any maidservants, only Nanny Fang. Guyan gave up his room and moved in with Gu Xiaoshun. Gu Xiaoshun didn't mind. After all, the bed was so big that it was enough for 3 people to sleep on it. Also, the 2 of them went to school together and learned skills together. Their relationship was so close that they were like brothers. Yao Shi and Nanny Fang lived in Guyan's room. The old chancellor lived next door. The old madam disliked the fact that she had to take a detour and go through the main door every time she wanted to rob the private stash. So, she simply let Gu Jiao and Yao Shi break through the walls of the 2 houses and turned it into a compound courtyard house. There were enough rooms. The reason why Nanny Fang lived in Yao Shi's room was mainly to take care of her. The news of Yao Shi's pregnancy wasn't hidden from them. Everyone knew that Yao Shi had a baby in her belly. Gu Yan stared at Yao Shi's belly for a long time. He couldn't believe that he was going to be an older brother. Little Jing Kong came to Yao Shi, clasped his hands behind his back, and tilted his head. "Madam, is the baby in your belly a younger brother or a younger sister?" Yao Shi smiled and asked, "Jing Kong, do you want a younger brother or a younger sister?" Little Jing Kong thought for a while and rolled his eyes. After confirming that Xiao Lulang wasn't at home, he tiptoed and whispered in Yao Shi's ear, "A younger brother. A younger brother like my bad brother-in-law." This way, he could flatten his bad brother-in-law. Ha ha ha. Little Jing Kong still felt regretful that his bad brother-in-law couldn't become Little 8. So he placed his hopes on the younger brother in Yao Shi's belly. He had a very strange logic. As long as the younger brother was born, his bad brother-in-law would become a younger brother. How could Yao Shi guess the unconstrained thoughts of a child? She thought that little Jing Kong wanted a younger brother to play with him. It was already not easy for her to get pregnant with a body like this. As for whether it was a son or a daughter, she felt that it was fine. Little Jing Kong carefully took care of Yao Shi and the little brother in Yao Shi's belly, then turned around to do his own things. Xiao Lulang had been a little busy recently. Feng Lin was in some trouble. He was from Song County, and after he passed the provincial examination, someone had used his name to farm. The land under the name of the Zhao country's high scholar could be exempted from paying taxes. Feng Lin's parents didn't farm. It was the relatives of the clan who hung fields in Feng Lin's name and received a lot of money as filial piety. Feng Lin didn't know anything about this. It just so happened that the imperial court was in the midst of rectifying the practice of hanging fields, and it just so happened that Song County was used as a model. This matter could be big or small. If it was big, it could cause Feng Lin to lose his title as a high scholar and be unable to participate in the imperial examinations. Feng Lin was extremely anxious. Xiao Lulang asked if his parents were involved in this matter. Feng Lin told Xiao Lulang that his parents weren't involved, but the relatives of the clan gave his parents some filial piety. When they gave it, they said that it was a small token of appreciation for Feng Lin's studies. After the incident, they insisted that it was a dividend from the hanging fields. His parents jumped into the Yellow River and couldn't clear their names. In order to not implicate their son, they almost committed suicide by hanging themselves. Fortunately, Feng Lin's younger sister found out in time and stopped them. It wouldn't be difficult to deal with this matter sooner or later. Feng Lin could go back and confront them face to face. Unfortunately, it was now the spring imperial examination, so Feng Lin couldn't leave. Xiao Lulang asked around and found out that the local provincial governor in charge of this matter was half a disciple of Elder Feng. When Elder Feng was the minister of the Honglu Temple, he had promoted him. Xiao Lulang sent an urgent letter to the provincial governor as Elder Feng's disciple. Xiao Lulang returned to Bishui Alley. At this time, little Jing Kong, who was supposed to be doing his homework in his room, was sitting on the door sill. Beside him was a puppy, 7 chicks, and an eagle that had grown up a lot. The formation was very neat. Xiao Lulang was annoyed and amused at the same time. Is there such a big formation to welcome me? Little Jing Kong glanced at him and proudly showed a gold plate in his hand. Jiao Jiao gave me a gift. After all this time, it turned out that he was waiting here to show off in front of him. Xiao Lulang just thought that it was an ordinary toy. The moment he held it in his hand, the plate felt heavy. He suddenly felt that something was wrong. Then he fixed his eyes on it and was dumbfounded. Wasn't this the death-free gold plate of the royal family? No, he hadn't been at home for a while. How did she get the death-free gold plate? What was going on? Jiao Jiao gave it to me. You're not allowed to snatch it. Little Jing Kong tiptoed to snatch the gold plate back and hugged it in his arms. Stingy. Xiao Lulang patted his little head and stepped into the courtyard. Little Jing Kong, who was scolded but was powerless to resist, went crazy. See, this was why he had to grow up quickly. He wanted to grow up to be as big as his bad brother-in-law and make him small. Then he would beat him up as hard as he could. TSK. Xiao Lulang saw Yao Shi in the backyard. A long time ago, Gu Jiao had mentioned to the family that she wanted to bring Yao Shi over. He was not surprised to see Yao Shi. Xiao Lulang could clearly feel that when Yao Shi was around, Gu Jiao's mood would become better. Perhaps Gu Jiao himself did not realize this. Xiao Lulang greeted Yao Shi and went to the kitchen. Gu Jiao was cutting vegetables. Xiao Lulang said, "Are you in a good mood?" "No." Gu Jiao tilted her little head. "Xiao Lulang, look at this smug face." Yao Shi was in a good mood because she had moved in with her son and daughter. Even her appetite had improved. Gu Jiao also had a good appetite. Xiao Lulang noticed that she ate half a bowl of rice more than usual. She even ate 2 chopsticks of the yellow daylily that she hated the most. Gu Jinyu's condition was not good. She was sent to the Ministry of Justice by the Emperor's order for the crime of damaging the imperial seal. Although this matter was still under investigation and she had not been convicted, she was still a weak woman locked in a cold and gloomy interrogation room. She was afraid and her body could not take it. At first, she really thought it was an accident. But gradually, she felt that something was wrong. Why would the emperor suddenly care about her marriage? At the time, she had been too arrogant and thought that she had enough capital for the emperor to pay attention to her. But in the past 2 days, the emperor had not even personally arranged the marriages of the princesses. They were all arranged by Empress Dowager Zhuang and Empress Xiao. Also, the imperial seal was such a precious item. How could the emperor casually put it in a pile of picture albums? The emperor had done it on purpose. From the moment she refused to admit that she had stolen Gu Jiao's invention, the emperor had decided to punish her. The emperor was not a temperamental tyrant. He had to have a good reason for punishing people. Thus, the imperial seal had been used. But the emperor did not immediately punish her. What was the emperor waiting for? While she was thinking, the door to the interrogation room opened. Eunuch Wei walked in. Gu Jinyu looked at him excitedly. "Eunuch Wei, you're here. Did His Majesty send you here?" I really didn't do it on purpose. I didn't know where the imperial seal was. Help me say a few good words in front of the emperor." Eunuch Wei smiled faintly and sighed. "Look at what the princess is saying. I'm just a servant. How can I influence the emperor's decision? Furthermore, the emperor is in a fit of anger. I don't dare to rashly provoke the emperor." Gu Jinyu was disappointed. "Then what do you want to do by coming here today? Is the emperor going to give the order to punish me? I'm here today to show the princess a clear path." Eunuch Wei smiled and said, "The princess should know how serious the crime of damaging the imperial seal is. If the princess still wants to live, it's best that you tell the truth about the bellows. Gu Jinyu's expression gradually froze. The emperor had said that the credit for the bellows belonged to the little divine doctor. That was right. He could not allow anyone to snatch it away, even if he did not announce it to the public. Especially when this person had slandered the little divine doctor for stealing her inspiration. She simply did not know what she was talking about. Eunuch Wei smiled coldly and said, "That's all I have to say. The princess is on her own. However, I have to remind the princess that the emperor's patience is limited." After Eunuch Wei left, Gu Jinyu slumped into the chair dejectedly. How did it become like this? Why did the emperor want to stand up for that country bumpkin? Didn't she just invent a bellows? What was so great about it? Other than this, what else did that girl know? Why was even the emperor protecting her? Gu Jinyu was furious. However, she was now in prison and had no way out. In the middle of the night, her personal maid came once. She had the maid enter the palace to beg Consort Shu. The emperor had already expected that Consort Shu would come to plead for Gu Jinyu. These few days, he had been staying with Empress Xiao, with Qin Chuyu. Although Empress Xiao doted on her youngest son, he was always present. She could not do anything to the emperor, even if she wanted to. Empress Xiao looked at the little fatty, who was engrossed in eating fruits. Her expression was indescribable. "Your Majesty, are you still bringing little Qi over tomorrow?" The emperor, "Yes, I've been doting on him recently." Qin Chuyu, who was completely unaware of the situation, was speechless. In the blink of an eye, it was the end of February. In a few days, the results would be released. The capital's examinees did not even enjoy their meals. Outside the examination compound, examinees could be seen waiting for the results to be released. After more than 10 days of grading in isolation from the world, the work in the inner hall was nearing its end. This is the last batch of papers. The vice president placed the last stack of papers in front of the president. The president rubbed his sore eyes and said, "Let's end the grading here for today. Everyone, please go and rest. We should be able to finish grading tomorrow." After grading, the apricot roll would be released in the afternoon. All the graders stood up with sore backs and walked out of their seats. They saluted the president. "Farewell, sir." The moon was dark and the wind was strong. Everyone had fallen asleep. Gu Jiao also lay on the bed in the east room. The weather at the end of February was still a little chilly. She was small and had a big temper, so she was not afraid of the cold. She covered herself with the quilt and fell into a deep sleep after a while. Then she started dreaming again. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels can be read for free. Novels with connotations that you can't find online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_89642826/1136211310. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikugo mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 208. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found on the internet are all available here. She dreamed that Xiao Lulang lived up to everyone's expectations and got first place. It was the biggest upset in the history of the spring examination. No one expected that an unknown country bumpkin would be able to defeat Anjun Wang and win the Hui Yuan. Those people who had spent a lot of money on Anjun Wang's first place all cried to death. Gu Jiao made a huge profit. 1,000 taels became 11,000 taels. The neighbors also made a lot of money. Gu Jiao felt strange when she dreamt of this. Oh, her husband was unlucky this time? It turned out that she was happy too early. Xiao Lulang was indeed an upset this time. However, Royal Prince didn't even make it to the bottom. It was the biggest upset this year. With Royal Prince An's intelligence, it was unbelievable that he didn't even pass the examination to be a tribute scholar. Royal Prince didn't believe it himself. He went to the Ministry of Rights to check his exam papers. However, he found that his exam papers were missing. The emperor ordered a thorough investigation. In the end, it was found that a transcriber had tampered with Royal Prince An's exam papers. Gu Jiao didn't know who ordered him to do this in her dream. If other people encountered this, they could only sigh that they were unlucky. However, with the power of the Zhuang family, they wouldn't allow Royal Prince to be wronged like this. In addition, many examinees went to the examination compound to question his results. After some consideration, the emperor restarted the examination. The examination was restarted. The Cool Breeze gang made a new bet. This time, there were more people who bet on Xiao Lulang. Everyone found this dark horse. Not many people bet on him to get first place. However, the number of people who bet on him to be in the top 3 reached an incredible amount. In order to get this huge amount of money, the Cool Breeze gang went to Xiao Lulang and tried to bribe him to fail the examination. However, they were rejected by Xiao Lulang. Seeing that the soft approach didn't work, the Cool Breeze gang tried the hard approach. However, they were all resolved by Xiao Lulang. In terms of a battle of wits, Xiao Lulang never lost. Of course, when it came to luck, he had never won. On the day that Xiao Lulang entered the examination hall, his carriage collided with another examinee's carriage. He was severely injured and did not successfully enter the examination hall. As for Royal Prince An, his situation wasn't any better than Xiao Yulang's. On the day of the exam, there was a problem in the examination hall. The exam didn't start until noon, and now it was late at night. However, Royal Prince An had night blindness. He couldn't see at night, so he didn't finish the test paper. In the end, he also had a miserable ending. After waking up from the dream, Gu Jiao sat on the bed in a daze. Am I that unlucky? To prevent a tragedy from happening, the safest way was to help Xiao Lulang avoid the car accident on the day of the retest. This was not difficult. Gu Jiao knew the location and time of the accident. The reason why it was said to be the safest method was because Commandery Prince An couldn't finish the test paper because it was dark. Without Commandery Prince An, Gu Jiao was confident that Xiao Lulang could easily win the competition. Another way was to directly prevent Royal Prince An's test paper from being taken away. As long as Royal Prince An's test paper was successfully marked, then no matter what the result was, there wouldn't be a retest. However, this method had a certain risk. After all, the first examination in the spring was done during the day. Royal Prince An performed normally. What if he was the one who got first place? Gu Jiao thought for a while and decided to let Xiao Lulang make the decision. Gu Jiao put on her clothes and opened the door. With a creak, the door of the west room on the opposite side also opened. The two of them looked at each other in astonishment. You haven't slept yet. You haven't slept yet? The two of them spoke in unison. You first, Xiao Lulang said. Oh. Gu Jiao said, I'm awake. Xiao Lulang came out with an oil lamp. Me too. He paused and said, Get up and drink some water. The water was on the table beside Gu Jiao. Gu Jiao poured him a bowl of water and handed it to him. She said, If your opponent fell into the water before the exam, would you save him? No. Xiao Lulang held the tea bowl and said without hesitation. Why? Gu Jiao blinked and looked at him. Xiao Lulang put down the tea bowl indifferently. Because I don't have an opponent. Gu Jiao's mouth twitched. Was he that arrogant? After Xiao Lulang drank the tea, the two of them went back to their rooms. However, Gu Jiao didn't go to sleep. She changed into her black clothes and sneaked out of the alley. She went to the clinic and entered her courtyard from the back door. Gu Qinglin was now living in her courtyard. Gu Chengfeng finished his mission and climbed over the wall into the courtyard. He then entered Gu Qinglin's room. He started to take off his night clothes. Halfway through, a cold voice came from the darkness. You don't have to take it off. Put it back on. Gu Chengfeng was so frightened that he stumbled forward and almost hit a pillar. He quickly tightened his belt and turned around. He looked at the small figure sitting on the chair in horror and flew into a rage. Why are you here? Looking for you, Gu Jiao said. Gu Chenglin flipped over. Gu Chengfeng's roar was stuck in his throat. He gritted his teeth and glared at Gu Jiao. Why didn't you say anything earlier? You only said something after taking off your pants. Gu Jiao stood up and walked past him out of the room. Let's go. She obviously wasn't saying goodbye to him. She wasn't so polite to him. So she was asking him to go with her? Go where? Gu Chengfeng's vigilant gaze fell on her small back. What do you want to do? Are you coming or not? Gu Jiao turned around and pointed at Gu Chenglin on the bed. If you don't come, I'll kick him out tomorrow. Gu Chengfeng gritted his teeth. You win. Gu Jiao walked forward and waved her hand behind his back. Don't worry. There's a reward. I won't mistreat you. Tomorrow was the day the results would be released. They had to find Royal Prince Anne's exam paper before the results were released and put it in the last pile of unmarked exam papers. Thanks to the rules of the Imperial Examination Court, all the officials in the inner hall were not allowed to step out of the inner hall before the results were released. They had to eat, drink, and go to the toilet inside. Therefore, even though the copying supervisor had taken Royal Prince Anne's exam paper, he didn't have a chance to take it out and deal with it. Why did you bring me here? Gu Chengfeng stood under the walls of the Imperial Examination Court and asked. Gu Jiao raised her eyebrows and looked at him from head to toe. She had an expression that said, Don't you know what you're doing? Gu Chengfeng was so angry that he trembled. He clenched his fists and squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. Steal what? 15 minutes later, Gu Chengfeng successfully sneaked into the inner hall. All the officials were asleep. Only the patrolling Imperial Guards were vigilant around the hall. Gu Chengfeng went through the rooms one by one. The copying officers were all men. They were about the same age. As for their appearance, it was dark, who didn't have a nose and 2 eyes. However, to be able to become the #1 thief in the capital, Fei Shuang had his own way of identifying people. He quickly found the copying officer whose appearance and figure matched Gu Jiao's description. Gu Jiao didn't say where he hid the exam paper. This part didn't exist in the dream. Gu Chengfeng looked up and down and finally found Royal Prince Anne's exam paper in his shoe. It was no wonder no one found it when he hid it in his shoe. Gu Chengfeng had covered his face. But that smell, Gu Chengfeng resisted the urge to vomit. He used 2 fingers to pick up Royal Prince Anne's exam paper. There were 2 sets of exam papers. One was written by Royal Prince Anne himself. The other was written by the copying officer. Gu Chengfeng first put the black paper into the file. Then, he put the red paper into the last stack of exam papers waiting to be marked. Of course, he couldn't just put it in like this. This was because the last stack of exam papers was the best exam papers selected by the previous copying officers. They all had the grades they had marked. Royal Prince Anne's red paper was hidden from the start. Therefore, no one had marked it yet. Gu Chengfeng had to imitate the other copying officer's handwriting. He randomly marked a few A's. Needless to say, it was quite convincing. These days, one couldn't be a thief without some talent. After doing all this, Gu Chengfeng left the examination hall. Gu Jiao covered her nose and looked at him with disdain. You stink. Gu Chengfeng, yes, I stink. Who the hell am I doing this for? Where's the reward? Gu Chengfeng reached out his hand coldly. Gu Jiao flicked her finger and a copper coin flew out. It landed right in Gu Chengfeng's palm. Gu Chengfeng looked at the lonely copper coin in his palm and almost cursed it out loud. He took the risk of being beheaded to enter the examination hall and touch the exam papers. In the end, he only got a copper coin, a copper plate. Gu Jiao turned her small body and put her small hands behind her back. She walked back confidently and majestically. "No need to thank me. See you later." Gu Qingfeng wanted to vomit blood. The next morning, the copying officer woke up and found that the exam papers in his shoes were gone. He panicked. He was worried that one of his colleagues or the Imperial Guards had found out. He waited in fear for someone to pick him up. Unexpectedly, the whole morning passed, and no one seemed to know about this. On the contrary, when he went to mark the exam papers, the hall was filled with an indescribable stench. After careful inspection, the stench came from one of the exam papers. How come he didn't notice that the exam papers were so smelly yesterday? In order not to affect the CEO's judgment of exam papers, the CEO handed the exam papers to a copying officer. "Copy it again." "Yes." The one who was assigned to copy it was another copying officer. He copied the exam papers obediently. At noon, all the exam papers were marked. In the afternoon, the inner hall was opened. A list was sent to the emperor under the escort of the Ministry of Rights presiding officer and the Imperial Guards. The emperor read it and handed it over to the cabinet to be stamped. The next morning, the examination hall finally released the results of all the students. Digression. Guess who got first place? The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_896/1136/18435. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikuga mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 209. Please scan the QR code below to download the app for more exciting content. Novels are updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found on the internet are all available here. The Imperial College received the news yesterday that the results would be released today, so the Imperial College decided to give the Imperial College students a day off. The elementary school had nothing to do with the Imperial exam, so they went to school as usual. In the past, Xiao Lulang was on holiday, while little Jingkong was on holiday. Xiao Lulang was not on holiday, while little Jingkong was on holiday. This time, little Jingkong went to school alone. Little Jingkong looked bitter. Who said that the elementary school students have nothing to do with the Imperial exam? I have to go and see how my son is doing. Little Jingkong carried his school bag and put his hands behind his back. He leaned forward slightly and walked away from Master Zhao, who was walking next door. His little face scrunched up and he sighed. He was so worried that he could die. Master Zhao looked like this when he was worried about his youngest son, who was the most worrisome. Xiao Lulang was not in a hurry to see the results. On the contrary, the neighbors swarmed over. They had placed a bet and had to see the results. Feng Lin and Lin Qingye also went. They woke up in the middle of the night and had been waiting at the entrance of the tribute court. Along with the two of them, there were also quite a number of eager examinees. The gate of the tribute court opened at 7 in the morning. 2 guards came out and posted the tribute scholar list on the notice board. The tribute scholar list was also called the apricot list because the apricot flowers were in full bloom during the imperial exam. Feng Lin and Lin Qingye rushed to the front of the apricot list. They looked down from the first place, Hui Yuan. It can't be. They were shocked at the same time. The first place was Xiao Lulang. But it was not only Xiao Lulang. There was also Royal Princeton. There were 2 Hui Yuan in this year's apricot list. This was the reason why the 2 of them were dumbfounded. Others might not understand Xiao Yulang's strength, but they had been taught by Xiao Lulang for so long, so how could they not understand? However, Royal Prince was indeed powerful. In addition, his family background was far superior to Xiao Yulong's. Therefore, it was not surprising for Royal Prince to win first place. Strangely, they were tied for first place. In the entire history of the Zhao country, there had never been such a shocking thing. There was actually a reason for this. In the exam, only those with grand complete exam papers A were qualified to become critical exam papers. Normally, after the exam, the CEO would not allow 2 grand complete exam papers A to appear. In other words, there was only 1 critical exam paper. Something went wrong with the test this time. Thanks to the cheating transcriber, An Junwang's paper was delayed and Xiao Liulong's paper was marked first. When the graders finished marking all the test papers for the 3 rounds, they picked out the top 200 test papers and handed them over to the 2 CEOs. These test papers were not separated one by one. The 3 test papers were placed together according to their numbers and were called one set. Among these test papers, the ones that were marked by all the graders were called Grand Complete Exam Papers. When the Grand Complete Exam Papers were given to the 2 CEOs, they received 2 A's. This was called Grand Complete Exam Papers. When the 2 CEOs marked the test paper with number 69, they were instantly stunned by the examinee's strength. This time, the 2 CEOs were all disciples of Grand Tutor Zhuang. The CEOs were naturally biased towards An Junwang. Before this, they had a certain understanding of An Junwang's style of writing. To be honest, when they saw the transcribed test paper, they felt that it was not very similar to An Junwang's style of writing. But this test paper was really too well done. It was too exquisite. It was completely beyond their imagination. It was the kind of indescribable excellence. Other than An Junwang, no one else in the world could write such a powerful essay. Therefore, even though they felt it was strange, the 2 were still certain that this was An Junwang's test paper and gave 2 A's. Xiao Liulong's test paper received Grand Complete Exam Papers. On the last day, when the 2 of them marked the real An Junwang's test paper, they felt a sense of familiarity. Although they did not want to admit it, this seemed to be An Junwang's style of writing. But if this was An Junwang, who was that? Under everyone's gaze, the 2 of them could not change the Grand Complete Exam Papers from before. It was easy to add words like Gu Chung Feng, but it was impossible to erase the words. The 2 of them could only bite the bullet and continue to give An Junwang 2 A's. In the past, when this happened, the apricot roll and their test papers would be sent to the palace for the emperor and the cabinet to decide. There were still only numbers on the test papers and no names. But everyone knew that one of the test papers must be An Junwang's. After the emperor looked at the test papers, he did not make a decision immediately. Instead, he called Grand Tutor Zhuang over and let him choose. Grand Tutor Zhuang snorted in his heart. What was there to choose? In today's world, could any random person be mentioned in the same breath as his grandson? However, when he looked at the 2 test papers with disdain, he was suddenly speechless. He was An Junwang's grandfather. Of course, he could recognize which style of writing belonged to An Junwang. The emperor asked, "Do we still need to call the other cabinet ministers over to choose the test papers?" Grand Tutor Zhuang cupped his hands and said, "No need. Everything will be decided by your majesty." The emperor smiled and said, "I think these 2 test papers are good. Why don't we tie for first place? What do you think, Grand Tutor?" Grand Tutor Zhuang was relieved. "Your Majesty is wise." For Grand Tutor Zhuang to tolerate another person tying for first place with his grandson, it was obvious how good the other person's test paper was. There was no way to criticize it. As long as there was something that could be argued, Grand Tutor Zhuang would never allow this tie for first place. However, the emperor could not suppress An Junwang all of a sudden. Currently, the cabinet was still controlled by Grand Tutor Zhuang. If the examinees wanted to become officials, they must first fall into Grand Tutor Zhuang's hands. In a corner of the palace, 2 men's voices came from behind a tree. "What are you doing? Didn't someone take it away? Why did it still appear?" Lord Tong said that he did hide An Junwang's test paper. However, for some reason, and Junwang's test paper appeared on the last day. He suspects that it was a ghost. How can there be ghosts in this world? If it wasn't a ghost, then why didn't the other party expose Lord Tong? That's true. Then, the next step of the plan. What next step of the plan is there? The apricot roll is already out. Do you think you can retake the exam? The original plan was to lose in Junwang's test paper. With the Zhuang family's power, it would not be difficult to find out that the test paper was lost. They would definitely find a way to retake the exam. During the first exam, they did not do anything because they only found out about Junwang's weakness 2 days before the exam. At that time, they did not have enough time to make a thorough plan. They could only use a roundabout method to make the exam retake the exam. At that time, they would make some mistakes in the exam hall and delay the opening of the test papers. And Junwang would not be able to see it at night and would naturally fail the exam. What a pity. Xiao Lulang and Junwang won the Huiyuan at the same time. The Qingfeng gang lost a lot of money. Gu Jiao's 1,000 taels of silver successfully became 11,000 taels of silver. Happy. The neighbors in Baishui Alley all bet on Xiao Lulang getting first place. He did get first place. Wasn't being tied for first place the same as getting first place? The Hui Yuan's title was already in the imperial court. How could a small Qingfeng gang not admit it? The Qingfeng gang cried miserably. The neighbors made a lot of money and hurried to the old lady to play cards with leaves. The old lady. Very good. The wallets are full. The sheep are fat. It's time to slaughter. It's all because of her. The old chancellor just came back from outside. As soon as he got off the carriage, the old lady grabbed him by the collar and dragged him to Master Zhao and Aunt Zhao's house next door to play cards. He was mainly responsible for carrying money. Feng Lin also passed the exam this time. He was almost at the bottom of the list. He was the 176th place. There was a total of 210 places. During the provincial examination, he was the 17th place in Yuzhou. When he came to the capital, he was the 170th place. This difference was very frustrating. However, he could be considered to have done well. In Yuzhou's provincial examination, there were a few people who were ranked higher than him who failed. There were not many people who were ranked higher than him. This was really a fight between immortals. It was too fierce. Lin Qingye was also on the list. His result was not bad. He was the 123rd place. One had to know that during the provincial examination, Yuzhou had a total of 50 people. He was ranked 45th and almost did not pass the provincial examination. Lin Qingye was so happy that he was dumbfounded. He did not waste the few thousand taels of silver. Liu Long's master was too amazing. Feng Lin nodded deeply and looked at him. As expected of a player who paid with money. Du Ruhan was ranked 15th on the list. It was slightly different from what he had imagined. His goal was to be in the top 10. However, this was also a good ranking. After all, it was the national examination. Only the top students were admitted. The examination was held once every 3 years, and there were only 210 people who were admitted. Du Ruhan was not someone who bit off more than he could chew. He was also not overly arrogant and self-confident. He quickly accepted his result and was satisfied with it. Of course, he also understood that he was able to pass the examination thanks to Gu Jiao. If not for the cold medicine she gave him, he would have collapsed in the first round. This was not the provincial examination or the county examination where there was a huge gap in strength between the examinees. The examinees were all outstanding. If one did not do well, they would often be left behind by more than 10 places. It could be the gap between the top and bottom of the list. That night, Du Ruhan carried many bags of things to Jadewater Alley. Ever since the news of Xiao Lulang passing the provincial examination spread out, the doorstep of the house was almost broken by people. Feng Lin and Lin Qingye also came. Thus, when he saw Du Ruhan, Xiao Lulang was not too surprised. It was just the things in his hands. Xiao Lulang saw that he was almost unable to carry them and said politely, It's just the provincial examination. There's no need to make such a big fuss. Jianyang. I'm here. Du Ruhan excitedly ran into the house. He was exactly the same type as Feng Lin. Xiao Liulang's face darkened. Just like in Gu Jiao's dream, Xiao Lulang broke the biggest dark horse in the history of the spring examinations. Because of Royal Prince and Xiao Liulang's first place was even more valuable in the eyes of the public. He was tied with Royal Prince and for first place. How heaven-defying was this poor boy? This news spread much faster than the explosion at the Ministry of Works. In just a day, the news had spread throughout the capital. Naturally, it also reached Marquis Xianping's ears. Marquis Xianping had a "don't lie to me" expression. Who got first place? Young master. Steward Lu said with a smile. He also bet on Xiao Lulang and won 100 taels. It was Gu Jiao who bet on him. At that time, he felt his heart ache. Now, his heart was bursting with joy. After the joy, he regretted it. Why didn't he bring an extra 180 taels of silver that day? Marquis Xianping's handsome face was full of suspicion. He was that amazing? He gave birth to another genius son? He kept feeling that something was wrong. Aya, why can't you give birth to a smart son? Isn't the young Marquis very smart? Marquis Xianping still had some self-awareness. Xiao Heng was smart not because he took after him. If he took after him, then he would be an uncouth old man. Xiao Heng took after his mother. He was smart, refined, meticulous, and knowledgeable. So who did this illegitimate son take after? Chun Yun's mother? Chun Yun's mother was a gentle and kind woman, but she didn't have this kind of brain. Marquis Xianping said with a serious expression, "Call those old antiques over. Also, bring me Xiao Liulang's test papers." All of the examinees' test papers were archived in the Ministry of Rights. Normal people wouldn't be able to get their hands on them. However, Marquis Xianping was not a normal person. Sometimes, he wasn't even human. Steward Lu obtained Xiao Liulang's handwritten ink scroll. Chang Jing also found a few old scholars with grizzled hair and beard who walked unsteadily. Marquis Xianping had them compare Xiao Liulang's test papers with Xiao Heng's test papers. The two people's test papers stunned all of the old scholars. Was this written by the same person? Marquis Xianping asked in a deep voice. No. One look and you can tell it's not. The old scholars all shook their heads. Are you sure? Marquis Xianping looked at them suspiciously. Marquis, if we can't even tell the difference between a person's literary talent, then we've lived in vain all these years. Not only are the two people's handwriting different, but their way of writing and thinking are also completely different. One was the day and the other was the night. Xiao Heng's test papers made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze, and their minds were clear. Xiao Liulang's test papers were like ice and snow, cutting into people's hearts. If it was the same person, how much pain and torture must he have gone through to be able to scrape his own bones like this? The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhpqg.com/89642_8964226/113588372. HTML Genius remembers this site's address in 1 second. www.zhpqg.com Biku Pavilion Mobile Reading Website. zhpqg.com. Chapter 210. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all here. Marquis Xianping decided to personally meet Xiao Lulang. Where does he live? Marquis Xianping asked Steward Lu. Clearwater Alley. Steward Lu told him the specific address of Xiao Lulang and Gu Jiao. Marquis Xianping rode a carriage to Clearwater Alley. It was Chang Jing who drove the carriage. Xiao Lulang was admitted to Huiyuan. Today, the alley was especially lively. The entrance of the alley was blocked by carriages. Marquis Xianping's carriage couldn't enter. He sighed. He didn't know that it was so difficult to meet an illegitimate child. Marquis Xianping abandoned the carriage and walked on foot. Chang Jing followed behind him. The two men entered the alley one after the other. They didn't need directions to know which house belonged to the little illegitimate child. The door was wide open and people came and went from time to time. Marquis Xianping suddenly said to Chang Jing, "Find a place to squat. No matter what happens later, don't come over." Chang Jing, "Oh." Marquis Xianping then went to Xiao Lulang and Gu Jiao's house. His original intention was for Chang Jing to find a place to quietly wait. But Chang Jing was a person who got full marks for execution. He found a small corner and stuffed his hands into his sleeves. He looked like a peasant and squatted facing the wall. When Marquis Xianping arrived at the house, a group of guests had just left. Xiao Lulang was about to close the door when a large hand pressed against it. Xiao Lulang opened the courtyard door to take a look. Marquis Xianping. Very good, no expression at all. Every day, Xiao Lulang became calmer in dealing with matters. He calmly glanced at Marquis Xianping and said, "Is there something you need?" With this cold attitude, if he really was Xiaoheng, Marquis Xianping's heart would burst with anger. Marquis Xianping took a deep breath and said, "Are you?" "No." Xiao Lulang interrupted him rudely. Marquis Xianping tilted his head slightly and looked at him with a puzzled frown. "Not what? I'm not done yet." Xiao Liulang's expression didn't change in the slightest. "Even if you ask, you won't be able to." Marquis Xianping's breath was stuck in his chest. Xiao Lulang removed his hand from the door. Marquis Xianping thought he was going to do something, but in the end, he saw him close the door. Marquis Xianping, this brat. Of course, Xianping had grown up in the military, so his skills were not for show. He took a big stride forward and dashed in. Bang! The door was closed, but Marquis Xianping was in the courtyard. Marquis Xianping raised his eyebrows and glanced at him. Xiao Lulang had no intention of paying attention to him. He turned around, intending to walk around him and enter the house. Xianping had expected him to be like this. His eyes narrowed as he covered his chest and coughed violently. As he coughed, he covered his mouth with a white handkerchief that he had prepared beforehand. When he removed the handkerchief, it was stained with blood. Yes, he was coughing up blood. He had old injuries on his body. A few years ago, during the battle with the Qin state, he went into battle with injuries. He won, but his old injuries became more serious. Xiaoheng also understood this point. Marquis Xianping deliberately spread the handkerchief flat. "I'll show you coughing up blood." However, Xiao Lulang didn't even look at it. "Can't even do this?" Marquis Xianping gritted his teeth and directly fell to the ground. In terms of shamelessness, if Marquis Xianping claimed to be second in the entire capital, no one would dare to claim to be first. Marquis Xianping had made up his mind to blackmail Xiao Lulang. He stood in front of Xiao Lulang and blocked the way. However, he didn't expect this little heartless guy to raise his leg and step over him without saying anything. Marquis Xianping was speechless. This wasn't the scariest thing. As soon as Xiao Lulang left, little Jing Kong ran over. Little Jing Kong looked at Marquis Xianping, who had fallen to the ground. "Oh, someone fainted here. Isn't this the handsome uncle I saw at the courier station last time?" Xiao Lulang, "Yes, treat him." Little Jing Kong, "Oh, but how should I treat him?" Xiao Lulang, "Treat him the way Jiao Jiao treats him." Little Jing Kong tilted his head and thought for a while. Then he squatted down and used his little hands to press on Marquis Xian's chest. This was how Gu Jiao treated patients. He imitated it very well, and his movements were also very standard. The only flaw was that he was too weak and couldn't press for a long time. Therefore, he decided to use his feet. He kicked off his shoes and jumped onto Marquis Xianping's body. Marquis Xianping's body tensed up. What the hell? Little Jing Kong stepped on his chest, trembling. Marquis Xianping, little brat, you're a bit heavy. Xiao Lulang calmly watched Marquis Xianping scam. Marquis Xianping had to continue with his act. Oh no, it's useless. Little Jing Kong jumped onto the ground. I'm going to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on you. Marquis Xianping. What do you mean? Little Jing Kong opened his mouth, took a deep breath, and pouted. Let go of that, Lord, let me do it. Auntie Lu, who lived next door, ran over while holding her dress. Marquis Xianping trembled all over. He opened his eyes and sat up. I'm done. Auntie Lu's face darkened. Marquis Xianping failed and left gloomily. However, he was lucky enough to meet the old chancellor the moment he walked out of the alley. The old chancellor had just come out of Master Zhao's house. He didn't expect Marquis Xianping to appear here. Who said that Marquis Xianping only knew how to fight and had no brains? This guy was really crafty when he wanted to. It was all because he distracted that demon empress. If he wasn't thinking about how to prevent Marquis Xianping from discovering him, how could he have made such an oversight? Marquis isn't me. How do you know I won't be sad? He felt that he could still make up for it. Is that so? Marquis Xianping laughed ambiguously. This time he really didn't continue speaking. Chongjing, let's go. Oh. After squatting for half an hour, his legs were numb from squatting. With his legs crossed, he limped out. Marquis Xianping looked at him with disdain. What's wrong with you? You took too big a step and pulled your balls? Chongjing. Only Xiao Lulang and the old chancellor understood Marquis Xianping's little episode. The others just thought that he was a guest who came to visit. When Gu Jiao came back from buying groceries, little Jing Kong told her that he saved someone. Gu Jiao thought that he was a guest and joked with him. Little Jing Kong put his hands behind his back and looked at Gu Jiao with a mischievous look. Quickly praise me, praise me, praise me. Jing Kong is really great. Gu Jiao praised him. Little Jing Kong tilted his head and said cutely, Is it just a verbal reward, Jiao Jiao? Gu Jiao gave him a small kiss. Little Jing Kong was so happy that he jumped and shook his head. He was so cute. Gu Jiao's heart almost melted. With a smile on her lips, she went into the kitchen to prepare dinner. Some guests saw that little Jing Kong was so cute and hurriedly waved at him, wanting to tease this little Jing Kong. Unexpectedly, little Jing Kong ended the business in a second. He put away the cute expression on his face and put on a serious and old-fashioned expression. He put his little hands behind his back and walked back to his small west room like Uncle Zhao. Everyone, the latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found on the internet are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_89642_113585052. HTML Genius remembered the website address in a second. www.zhbqg.com Biku Pavilion Mobile Reading Website. zhbqd.com. Chapter 211. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. The whole family was happy that Xiao Lulang was admitted to Hui Yuan. The old chancellor didn't say anything, but the smile in his eyes couldn't be hidden. Even though he thought that with his disciple's ability, there was no doubt that he would be admitted to Hui Yuan, It didn't stop him from being happy. He cooked a few more dishes for dinner, and the whole family had a hearty meal. The old lady gave Xiao Lulang a big red envelope. She also gave Gu Jiao the money she won from playing cards with EZ today. Her grandnephew had a hard time taking the exam, and Jiao Jiao had a harder time taking care of this brat. Xiao Lulang accepted the red envelope and turned to give it to Gu Jiao. "Cough, household expenses," he said seriously. "Oh." Gu Jiao accepted it. The money earned by Qing Feng Gang wasn't as good as the money given by her husband. "Are there any more exams?" Gu Jiao asked. "There are." Xiao Lulang said there will be a second exam at the end of March and the court exam in April. The so-called second exam was actually more like a roll call exam. It didn't have much meaning, and it didn't count towards the results. It was said that it was to compare handwriting and prevent people from cheating in the spring examination. The court exam was the next highlight. The court exam was personally presided over by the emperor, and the 9 ministers were invigilators. All the examinees sat under their eyes and answered the questions. One could imagine the pressure. In the previous dynasty, the court exam only lasted for 1 day. In this dynasty, in order to better select talents, the exam was changed to 1 day of examination paper and 1 day of face-to-face examination. But not all examinees had the opportunity to take the face-to-face examination. Basically, only the outstanding examinees in the first round of examination could be summoned by the emperor to be personally examined by him. Of course, if the emperor was willing, he could casually pick someone to answer the questions in the first round of examination. This was a test of the examinees' psychological quality and improvisation. Some examinees were very knowledgeable, but they were too timid and couldn't perform well in the court exam. Therefore, their current ranking didn't mean that they could achieve the same results in the court exam. Xiao Lulang also encouraged Feng Lin and Lin Qingye in the same way. He wanted the two of them to focus on the examination. "You won't be able to pass?" Gu Jiao asked. "That won't happen," Xiao Lulang explained patiently. The court examination didn't have a ranking system. In other words, as long as one passed the examination, one would have a chance to become a grand scholar. However, grand scholars were also divided into different levels. The top 3 in the court examination were called the first-rank scholars. There were the Zhuangyuan, the Banyan, and the Tanhua, and they were bestowed the title of scholar. The second rank was bestowed with the title of Jinshi, while the third rank was bestowed with the title of Jinshi. First and second place grand scholars were considered official grand scholars. Third place grand scholars were said to be equivalent to grand scholars, but in reality, they still failed to make the list. Giving a grand scholar title was a consolation for those who failed the list. It was unlikely that those who failed the examination would be able to develop themselves in the capital. At most, they would be able to become a county magistrate of the 7th or 8th rank. First-place grand scholars could directly enter the Hanlin Academy. Second and third-place grand scholars would take another court exam. Those who passed were called Shuji scholars. Shuji scholars would study for 3 years and pass the exam to enter the Hanlin Academy. The Hanlin Academy was the place where the talents of the Zhao country were stored. There was a saying, only grand scholars could enter the Hanlin Academy. Those who weren't in the Hanlin Academy couldn't enter the Imperial Cabinet. The Hanlin Academy was the place that all examinees dreamed of going to. In reality, entering the Hanlin Academy didn't mean that one would have a meteoric rise. The Hanlin Academy also had its exams and rules. That was a story for later. Gu Jiao pondered for a moment. She had already become the wife of a tribute scholar. The next step was to become the wife of a grand scholar. "Who's third?" she asked. Because Xiao Lulang and Jun Wang were tied for first place, there was no second place. The next person was the third place. The third-place tribute scholar was a classmate of Xiao Yulang's with the surname Chao. He was 30 years old this year. He wasn't a native of the capital. Back in his hometown, he had made a name for himself at a young age. He had taken the exams a few times and failed to pass. This year, he passed the imperial examination in spring and became a tribute scholar. Gu Jiao remembered that this name wasn't on the betting list of the Cool Breeze gang. He must be a dark horse. However, due to Xiao Liulang's reputation, not many people paid attention to him. At dinner, the whole family was full. Perhaps because they were happy, everyone ate more than usual, except for little Jingkong. As the only child in the family, little Jingkong was always vigilant in times of peace. This time, his bad brother-in-law tied for first place with someone else. Everyone was so happy just because they tied for first place. It was obvious that they didn't expect much from him. It was obvious that he was a poor student. Little Jingkong decided to remind his bad brother-in-law not to be too arrogant. He didn't want him to go back to square one. Of course, he also decided to give him a reward. Reward me? In the study, Xiao Lulang looked at little Jingkong strangely. Did the sun rise from the west? Little monk wanted to reward him. Little Jingkong put his little hands behind his back and nodded. His little face was serious as he said, Teacher Jiang said that we should care for the weak. His bad brother-in-law was the last in the exam, so he was definitely in the weak. Xiao Lulang pointed at the paper on the table and said, Please, I got first place in the exam. Little Jingkong snorted and said, Just tied for first place. Xiao Lulang looked at him in both anger and amusement. Then, why don't you take the exam for me to see? Wait for me to grow up. Little Jingkong was full of confidence. Xiao Lulang didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, Well, what are you going to reward me with? Little Jingkong asked, What do you want? What could Xiao Lulang ask him for? He couldn't ask him to rent for free. Xiao Lulang thought for a moment and thought of something that he coveted. It's a gift from Jiao Jiao on your birthday. Little Jingkong was furious. You're too much. You want to take away the gift from Jiao Jiao. Xiao Lulang spread his hands innocently and said, You asked me what I want, and now I'm telling you. Little Jingkong frowned. He was a good boy who kept his word. He couldn't go back on his words. He endured the pain and asked, You want the checkers that Jiao Jiao gave me? Xiao Lulang said, Why do I want the checkers? I want that. Little Jingkong and Xiao Lulang had the same birthday. Gu Jiao Jiao gave both of them gifts. Besides the checkers, there was something else for little Jingkong. Xiao Lulang was referring to the paper crane. Little Jingkong clenched his fists tightly and looked at Xiao Lulang in disbelief and pain. You're a big man. Why do you want that? That's for us kids. Oh, he finally remembered that he was a kid? Xiao Lulang laughed and said, I want it. Are you giving it to me or not? It was as if Marquis Xianping was shameless. Little Jingkong looked at Xiao Lulang with a complicated expression, as if saying, Oh my God, how can you be so confused? Little Jingkong took a deep breath and closed his eyes. His expression was indescribable. After a while, he made up his mind and said, Okay, if you insist. As he spoke, he bravely took a step forward. Under Xiao Liulang's astonished gaze, he kissed him on the right cheek. Xiao Lulang was speechless. After little Jingkong kissed him, both of them were in a bad mood. What kind of punishment is this, my God? Little Jingkong, I sacrificed too much. Little Jingkong was shocked. He stuck out his tongue, rolled his eyes, and went out in a frenzy. Xiao Lulang came back to his senses and shuddered, indicating that he was also shocked. When Gu Jiao entered the room, Xiao Liulang's mouth was still twitching. What's wrong? Gu Jiao looked at him in surprise. Xiao Lulang coughed softly and said, Nothing. It was so embarrassing that it was not worth mentioning. Gu Jiao walked into the room and handed him a small brocade box. This is, Xiao Lulang took the box and opened it. There was a red satin hairband inside. He was not yet a crown, so he could not wear one. He was also not used to using a hairpin. The original hairband was old. This was the color that Gu Jiao personally dyed. It complemented him perfectly. He was as cold as jade, yet as beautiful as peaches and plums. Is this a gift from Huiyuan? Xiao Lulang asked. Gu Jiao was stunned. Clearly not. Xiao Lulang lowered his eyes. He didn't say anything, but his appearance inexplicably revealed a trace of grievance. Gu Jiao suddenly felt that she had wronged her little husband. Xiao Lulang sighed and said, Jing Kong just gave me a gift. What happened to not mentioning it? Even Jing Kong gave him a gift. Wouldn't it be unreasonable if she did not give him a gift? Gu Jiao quickly asked, what gift do you want? Actually, it doesn't have to be too troublesome. Something simple will do. Xiao Lulang straightened his expression and said seriously, it's something that little Jing Kong has on my birthday, but I don't. The last time Xiao Lulang said this, he received a small kiss from Gu Jiao. Oh. Gu Jiao understood instantly. She turned around and left. When she entered the room again, she had a paper crane in her hand. Here. In Gu Jiao's opinion, little Jing Kong had on his birthday, but Xiao Lulang did not have a kiss and a paper crane. Since he had already given her a kiss, then the paper crane was the only thing left. Xiao Lulang, who did not want this paper crane at all, was speechless. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that cannot be found online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_8964226/113555252. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikuga mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. You're tuning in to the Echo Reads YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.